Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Howdy, y'all. I'm the host of Adult Onset Horsemanship, Daniel Dolphin, and I'm not just a horsemanship clinician, I am also the bit guy. My years learning chemistry and engineering combined with 3 decades of training horses has put me in a unique position to understand how and why bits function. As a bonus, my sense of humor means that you will be able to listen to me explain what I know and not suffer. Typical sources of information on bits are from the very people selling bits. Perhaps you've also found some things on social media. Do they really know what they're talking about? You might have seen some other sources like graffiti in event arena restrooms, like if your horse won't stop, big shanks will bend hocks. If your barrel horse lags, you need bigger gags. Dressage horses without German bits are owned by nitwits. If the mouth is too open, flash it shut and keep hoping. If you really want to educate yourself and ask all of your questions, the Bit Course 2.0 is for you. It expands on my original video that is still being used as a resource in over 25 universities, has been vetted by experts, and have numerous testimonials from trusted peers within the industry. Science, common sense, experience, and humor are the tools that we'll use. You can choose from the Bit Course 2.0 self-guided version or the Bit Course 2.0 masterclass that has live group meetings with me for 10 weeks. Both courses have a community within where you could post pictures or videos of the homework and ask questions or offer thoughts at any time. Participants and their contributions allow the course to continuously evolve and improve. Bit fitters have become more mainstream. What we are doing is significantly more than just bit fitting. You can get certified by me through the masterclass, and you will learn not just about bits, but also anatomy, communication through the bit, hand usage, and how to consult with your future clients. There's no shortage of people and horses needing help with bit problems. No matter your discipline or that you're an amateur or a seasoned professional, we can help you. Our last masterclass of the year kicks off September 20th. Registration is now open to join Cohort Echo, and we are also running a Labor Day special for a limited time. Any of our online courses, this includes the self-guided course and the masterclass 3 monthly payment options, you can get 30% off using coupon code LABOR30, no spaces, at checkout. Link and code are in the show notes. So join me in the next masterclass or in one of the self-guided courses. Your horsemanship will be elevated, and you'll never see horses being ridden the same way again.
Our guest today is Miss Veronica Rosenthal, known by everyone as Roni. She is a speech and language pathologist as well as a certified therapeutic riding instructor. She does business as Dark Horse Therapeutics. Roni is a lifelong horsewoman native to Central Texas. She graduated from the University of Texas at Austin in 2014 with a BS in Communication Sciences and Disorders, with a focus on American Sign Language linguistics. Roni pursued her Master's of Science in Speech and Language Pathology from Gallaudet University, awarded in 2016. She holds her CCCs from the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, and is licensed to practice speech language pathology in the state of Pennsylvania. She is fluent in American Sign Language and enjoys providing services in ASL. Roni will be able to intersect her personal interest in horsemanship with her professional vocation as a therapist in 2019 after achieving the Certified Therapeutic Riding Instructor status with Path International. For those of you who don't know, that's the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. They're the main governing body for all the therapeutic riding stuff. Not the only one, but the biggest one. Roni currently lives in West Philadelphia with her husband and her dog, Lucy. I guess the husband is unnamed. She works full-time in early intervention services for deaf and hard of hearing children. Evenings and weekends are devoted to schooling horses, practicing equine bodywork, and enjoying the forever learning process of a life with horses. I'm very excited to do this one. To my knowledge, this will be the first podcast ever done entirely in American Sign Language. I've been holding that one in my pocket for about 2 weeks in preparation for this. All right. Well, Roni, how are you today?
I'm great, Daniel. Today is my day off. I went to the gym. My husband's out of town. It's a good, relaxing day for me.
Oh, that sounds perfect. Absolutely. You having a margarita while we do this one then?
No, I wish. Maybe later.
Well, I know you've listened to the podcast, and so you're well aware we start everybody off with our lightning round icebreaker questions. These are for points and prizes, so you want to be on your A game. Okay?
Got it.
If you were a Jedi, what % chance is there that you would misuse the Force?
Is it misusing if one is full Sith?
No, I guess then that's proper use or improper but fully purposeful and intentional use of So
Yeah.
that's a nice twist. I like that a lot. Yeah.
We take
Who's
Star
the
Wars
other?
very seriously in our house. Up until very recently, my husband, whose name is Mason, he can be named, had a Jedi Padawan rat tail. Blessedly, that is no more as of this week, but that was a marriage conversation that was very interesting.
I was gonna say, did you allow that at the altar and all? Did you have it tucked in the back of the
no
tux?
Control. I have no control. I had to.
That's incredible. I love it. So, would you be the master or the apprentice? Because as we know, there are always only two. So
there's always only two. You're right. I definitely consider myself still an apprentice. Yeah.
The Dark Horse Therapeutics is taking on a whole new light now. Let me say. Morning or evening?
Morning. Sometimes I fall asleep fantasizing about my coffee the next morning.
Okay. Well, I had an old coffee question in here, but since you brought that up, do you have like are you a coffee nerd? You've got to have this exactly kind of thing, or what's your brew?
I'll take it all, but I do love espresso. I usually make myself 1 to 2 Americanos a day with a little splash of half and half. One of my many jobs at one point or another was as a barista, so I can do the fancy milk frothing thing, but mostly I just drink whatever form it'll come, but usually with a little milk or cream.
Okay. How long do you dunk a cookie in milk?
Not too long. I like my cookies pretty crunchy.
Or do you dunk them in coffee instead, I guess, if you got that?
No,
or maybe
milk.
Tea. I don't know.
Milk is good.
I needed a little perk this afternoon. So for the first time ever, I bought one of those commercial cold brew cartons. So I'm sipping on a little mocha cold brew right now. And it's not bad, but it's not winning me over either.
Mm-hmm.
But a hot cup of coffee when it's 98 degrees outside isn't that appealing to me either.
Yeah, I believe it. Cold brew will get you. That's what I do for getting rid of a migraine, actually, is really cold brew coffee.
Okay. If people don't recognize Clark Kent because of his glasses, do you think his optometrist knows his real identity?
Gosh. Maybe there's like a secret network of optometrists who knows these different secret identities, and they have to pass clearances every year, and maybe he goes to a different optometrist every time. I don't know. I'm sure there's many ins and outs to secret identities.
That could be true. It could be, as we're learning in the public right now, apparently doctors keep secrets very well.
Ooh.
What is the best horse movie?
I'm so glad you asked. I don't think anyone else has said this. I'm going to say confidently Lord of the Rings,
Okay.
specifically Two Towers, but Fellowship as well. There's a ton of, if you get the Ultra Nerd badge and get the extended version DVDs, there's a lot of material about Viggo Mortensen talking about the horse that actually he bought and took home with him. And he also bought the stunt rider's horse. I think he bought Shadowfax for her. And she really
Mhm.
rode him bareback and bridleless in the film. And I mean, ultimately, it's Lonesome Dove, but I wanted to throw out Lord of the Rings as well because I love Lord of the
I,
Rings.
I think that's a great one. Yeah. And can you imagine, like, I always think of things from this angle. Someone came to me and said, I need you to come up with about 300 head of horses that actors can ride with weapons, and they all need to be 1,400 pounds or more. You're like, that's not a shopping list you just
Zealand.
go fill out, right? You know?
In New
Well,
Zealand. I don't know how they did it.
yeah, they had to have imported some of them. I mean, there's just, I can't imagine there was that many horses that fit that bill in New Zealand, but who knows? Anyway, it's pretty cool.
Mhm.
I appreciate the nerdity of your response there as well. What skill or technique do you not have with a horse that you admire in someone else and wish you did have?
Oh, riding. Yeah. Um,
Well,
riding. What's that?
you ride. I mean, it's not like you don't know what you're doing on the back of a horse.
I want to be a great rider. I want to be the kind of rider that sits on a horse and the horse takes a deep breath. That's the kind of rider I want to be.
Okay.
I can get there.
That,
I can fool around and lollygag and get there, but really, really good, skillful, technical, high school riding. That's what I want someday.
I have full faith in you, and I think you have a card to play here. If Mason ran around with a Padawan rat tail for years, then he can't exactly bug you about how much you spend or how much time is at the barn, right? He's got to cut you some slack. So you got to pass on that. I think your chances are good. I really do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I won the lottery with him in terms of horse girl husbands. He does laundry and dishes, which is pretty incredible. I cook. That's kind of my wheelhouse in terms of housework, but yeah, he's great.
So this will be in your wheelhouse as well. Is it uncool that there's an S in the word lisp?
Yes. Yeah. And one of my least favorite approaches for treating deaf and hard of hearing kids is super hard for deaf and hard of hearing kids to say. Listening and spoken language, they abbreviate it as LISL. And that's just, it's so hard to say. So, yeah.
It's like some of these kids that they have the hyphenated last names and all, and now you're going to go to kindergarten and learn how to spell Sheldon Scheffelfieldberg Bronkowski. I
Uh,
mean, we set that kid up for problems right from the start,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, my maiden name is Looney, Looney, like the tunes. So I have compassion for silly last names.
Most important quality of a horseman or horsewoman.
Communication.
I like that. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you back a trailer?
I'm going to say a confident 2 for
Oh,
the number
really?
of times I've backed a horse, a truck and trailer. Got a little gap
Okay.
in my education there, Daniel.
I think that's the lowest number by a good chunk that anybody has given yet. So, well, I admire your honesty. I will just say here confidently, or not confidently, but compassionately, You would not believe the number of people that have come to me over the years to take a lesson that I've had to turn their truck and trailer around for them in the parking lot. It's a high number, very, very high number. So if you're one of those people that has to ask for that, I assure you, whatever trainer you're going to has done that many, 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 many times. It's not just you by a long shot. So Bay or Sorrel?
Well, it's in my business name, Bay Horse Mafia all the way. I don't know. I wouldn't think I'd have color preference, but I have had now 4 big bays with a star come find me in my life. And so I guess I'm a bay girl. Big bay with a star.
That's a pattern for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs or cats?
Probably dogs, although I really like cats. But yeah, I've mostly had dogs. My husband's allergic to cats, so I gotta wait till I have my own barn to have a cat.
So what is, you mentioned Lucy in your bio. What is Lucy?
Lucy is a vicious, full half rat terrier, yappy quarter Chihuahua, cuddly quarter Pomeranian. So she's a great dog. I've had her for 6-ish years now. She came to me kind of midlife, and she's 14 now. She's going deaf, and so I have to be careful with her at the farm. She used to be really good about going with me and being out of the way of the horses, and she was a pretty good ratter. But I get pretty nervous about her recall nowadays. So if we're in the barn, it's okay. She can hear a little better. But if we're out in the fields, I've had some anxiety moments because she'll take off after geese and whatnot. So, but she's my buddy. She goes with me a lot.
So not that this is necessarily in your wheelhouse, but who knows? Maybe you know this. But so why is it that there are so many dogs that go deaf in air quotes old age? Because old age for dog is, like you say, 13, 14, 15, whereas people at 14 and 15, right, no hearing problems are typical there. You have any idea why
Yeah,
their auditory shelf life is that short?
presbycusis or age-related hearing loss. We all experience hearing loss. It's like we all experience dementia to one point or the other. And so basically you have the nerve cells get tired and damaged over time. It's not like a 14-year-old human is the same age-wise as a 14-year-old dog. In human years, she would be quite a bit further up there. So yeah, we all experience age-related hearing loss, presbycusis, and yeah, that's just a common thing that happens as we get older and our nervous system starts to degrade a little bit.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes, 1,000 times yes. If there is not pineapple on pizza, maybe I don't want pizza.
So you're not just it can be there. You're like, that's one of the main ingredients I want to have. Okay. That's a strong stance. I like that. Is it a Hawaiian pizza for you? Like it's pineapple and ham, or you can mix and match or what?
I think it's a Hawaiian pizza for sure. Canadian bacon, pineapple, red onion, maybe some jalapenos, and ranch dressing to dip it in.
Okay. I like it. Live your best life now. Absolutely. So this is where I normally ask, are you a cook? But you already said that you're a cook. So what do you like to cook? What's your jam on the stove and in the oven?
Well, I am a Texan and I married a nice Jewish boy from Skokie, Illinois. And so my powers of brisket have like exponentially taken off. I make a really good brisket. I am a pretty skilled pie maker. I just made a strawberry rhubarb pie not too long ago because it was in season. But I'm pretty busy during the week. And so I do a lot of like toss it in the oven, baked chicken or salmon or vegetables. And kind of we try to eat leftovers for a couple days. I'd love to have more time to cook. I'm looking forward to having a 2-day weekend someday. But yeah, I love to cook.
So I'm going to ask a selfish curiosity question here. So for those who do not know, the Jewish people are eating kosher, and my understanding is that means only the front half of the cow, which is why brisket is one of the prime cuts up there. But to me, the best cut on the whole cow is a ribeye, which is also, it's in the rib section, so it's in front of the digestive tract. So can they have a ribeye as well? Is that considered kosher or?
My husband's family are super secular. I don't know that I have no idea. I'd have to look that up.
No, like I said, I was just curious.
Yeah.
So
I
I've
hope
always, I like a brisket too, but if
for,
give me a brisket or ribeye, I'm taking ribeye.
yeah. I mean, you haven't had my brisket, so.
What is your horse industry related pet peeve?
This is kind of silly. This probably comes from my background as a therapeutic riding instructor, but I see it everywhere. I see professionals do this all the time. I don't like it when people put their hand on the back of the cantle as the first point of contact during mounting. I think that it puts pressure on the lumbar spine, on the loin, and it just, prepares the horse to be like, oh, shit, my back, And so I think it's much kinder to the horse to at least initially have your heavy torso center of gravity more towards the shoulders than towards the hind end. Obviously, you want to get on and sit up straight. But yeah, I see people do that all the time. Professionals constantly is they grab the cantle, the back of the saddle, and that bothers me.
I'm right there with you. One of my more popular YouTube videos has been one on mounting properly, and the part of it I most disagree with is if your hand is back there when you go to swing your leg across, you have to let go of a balance point to get your leg where it needs to go, and so you're compromised. And if the horse were to move at that moment or whatever, like you're about to have a story to tell all your friends at some point. So it just makes no sense to start off with your hand in a place that's blocking you from getting on the horse. But you're right, many people do it.
Yep.
That's a good one. Very good. Feral or spoiled, if you had to pick one to deal with?
I've dealt with a lot of spoiled horses. You've helped me with a couple. I have not had the chance to deal with a feral horse, so someday I'd like to give that a try, probably with some help.
That's a good answer. Do you have a least favorite barn chore?
I hate sweeping.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Yep, absolutely. How about a most favorite barn chore?
I like feeding, and I also like taking horses in and out. We have a beautiful farm. I'm blissfully happy at my current barn. And yeah, it's just a really lovely Zen moment to be walking a couple of horses back and forth from pasture.
Do you have any favorite words of wisdom?
Yeah, I love Karen Rolfe. She does her business is dressage naturally. And she always closes out her podcast with never underestimate the possibility for things to change in ways you cannot yet imagine. Change for the good in ways you cannot yet imagine. So those are my favorites. I can be a little bit intense and myopic, and so sometimes doom and gloom is on the horizon for me, and I have learned that sometimes things are going to work out in ways that you never would have thought of. So yeah, I try to remember that.
I like that. Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Crunchy, I think. Yeah.
Are you a big peanut butter person? That was a lot of hesitation, so I'm guessing not on your radar very much.
I would say crunchy on sandwiches, but if I'm going to do like a peanut butter banana dessert situation, I'm probably more likely to do almond butter or maybe like something chocolatey like Nutella or something. I do love peanut butter. Not objecting to peanut butter.
Nutella seems, I don't know why I think of, I would have on the radar, and Nutella seems like a luxury snack to me. I don't know why, but for some reason, that's how it plays out in my head.
For sure.
Would
Off-brand
you
Nutella
tell us
thing.
something unexpected about you?
Something unexpected.
Is there off-brand Nutella?
Oh, sure. Definitely. There's also healthier versions of Nutella. More nutty, more cacao, less sugar.
I'm gonna keep an eye out for that. Yeah. Okay, something unexpected. Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's the lag, but it interrupted you there. I apologize.
I would say that the kind of stereotypical horse girl, low maintenance thing doesn't really apply to me. I'm a little bit of a glamour puss. I like clothes and makeup and beauty routines. And at one point when I was in college, I was buying and selling a lot of vintage clothing and doing kind of elaborate period piece vintage clothing looks. So that was a phase. It was kind of weird. It was kind of like being goth or something. I'd be like going to the grocery store in my pin curls or whatever. But yeah, that was a thing that I did, and I still enjoy expressing that part of myself. I live in Philadelphia. My husband's a fine artist, and so it's kind of like leading a double life a little bit. I spend most of my time at the barn in jeans, and then on the weekends, every once in a while, I get to, I don't know, wear purple eyeliner and go to a weird experimental art show.
So, since your husband had the Padawan braid, that's kind of y'all both play dress up, and so your excuse on the horse thing may have just gotten eaten up a little bit. You lost 30% of it or something, huh?
Yeah.
Thoughts or feelings?
This one's hard for me. I would say I get in trouble with both, especially when I start having feelings about my thoughts or thoughts about my feelings. In my horsemanship, I would say I endeavor to feel more and think less. I can be definitely prone to overthinking. But I like that about myself too. I'm pretty analytical and, um, yeah, assessment oriented.
What would you have been professionally if not a speech pathologist?
And also not a horse person.
Yeah.
Probably the person on a theater or movie set who's like, no, no, you would not address the Duke as His Grace here. You would say, Sir, what's his name? Or, like I think they call it a continuity specialist, someone with helps with like the
Mhm.
historical accuracy of particular scenes, maybe costume design or something along those lines. I love historical period pieces and yeah.
Okay. Are you decisive or indecisive?
Decisive.
I always love the people just don't understand because I edited, I guess, but the indecisive people. Invariably, I think I had one person who told me they were indecisive right away, but the pause that I wait on, like 2 seconds in, I know the answer. If you haven't opened your mouth, it's the other one, right? Do you
Definitely.
have a favorite piece of tack or horse related tool?
I don't know, Daniel. I love my bit hobble.
Okay. That's good. Very good. More people should try the bit hobble thing. It's a game changer.
Changed my life, and nobody knows about it either. It's not common knowledge.
Ear bonnet or no ear bonnet?
No. I've never met a horse who likes it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really get it.
I'm with you. I've had a couple of people that said they lived in an area where like gnats were really bad, and so there was actually a benefit to it. But barring something like that, that's just a mystifying thing to do to a horse to me. Like their ears are one of the most expressive parts of the whole thing. Let's put a blanket over them. I mean, it just like what who the hell thought of that? I mean, makes no sense. But yeah, okay.
It's so that they can stuff the ears so that they don't hear things. It shows and what I mean. That's the ugly side of that, I think.
And so like honestly, for like mounted shooting or something, like I could see a legitimate deal there. I'm gonna wear hearing protection, so I'll give the horse some as well. But like barring having a good reason, like I just because it's blue and matches my saddle pad would not be a good reason for me. But each to their own. Cold showers or cold food forever?
This is really bad from a Chinese medicine perspective, both ways. I guess cold showers, since cold food is like entering your system and could make you cold from the inside out. So I guess cold showers.
So as a rider, are your hands or your legs better?
I don't know. I have body worker hands. I think my hands are pretty good. And I also broke my pelvis when I was 16 coming off a horse. And so I know that I have a lot of crookedness. So I think as of right now, my hands are better than my legs.
We haven't done a lot of work with leg stuff and more advanced things in lateral, but your hands are definitely pretty good and soft. So
Thank you.
left lead or right lead?
Left
Is there
lead.
one you have to be more intentional? Left. Okay. Are you right or left footed?
Right footed.
Okay. That fits.
Your data collection going well on that question?
It's getting better. A couple of people screwed me up, but now we're starting to get the trend going. Yeah. you know exactly what's going on there. What is the best smell in the barn?
My horse. My warm blood that I am caretaker for, Aslan, is particularly stinky. I have to wash his blankets and his sheets more often than I would other horses, but I'm told that he has a warm blood smell. But I think he smells really good.
So that's interesting. I saw a clip not long ago that it was a horse trainer that did some different disciplines. I think he was a gaited guy, but he rode a lot of different gaited breeds. And he was making the comment that he could smell the difference between the breeds. And then he actually blindfolded himself and had his assistant lead different horses up to him. And I mean, that's this horse. I mean, he I don't know if he cheated. I mean, I don't know, take it at face value, but he identified them by smell. And I don't know that I've paid that much attention to the smell, or maybe I'm just not as olfactory sensitive as some people are. I don't know, but anyway, that's interesting. So, what would you say is the warm blood smell like? Is it yeasty or musty or
Money. It smells like money. It smells like money and neurological disorders. No, it's Musky. Musky.
I'm gonna have to test that now. I'm gonna have to see if I can smell the difference between horses. I don't. This is just a little offshoot, but as we travel, my wife comes with me a lot of times, and we always try to sightsee a day or two wherever we go, if it's somewhere we haven't been, interesting and all. And I did not realize this about myself, but apparently when I travel and I'm experiencing new things, I often smell trees and things like that. And I didn't know this about me until we went to England, and she has 30 pictures of me smelling rocks and trees and all sorts of different things. And so apparently there's a strong pattern there. And here I am not knowing the difference between the smell of a quarter horse, a paint, and a warm blood. It's hard to believe, really.
Gotta get in.
Sweet, salty, or spicy?
I'm gonna say salty. I use those salt electrolyte packets a lot. I have a really hard time tolerating heat. It's kind of good that I left Texas because I never fully heat conditioned. So yeah, I'm always craving salt, I think.
What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
Shit, I'm not prepared. I think that flying dinosaurs are really interesting, the pterodactyl groups. And if you've ever stood in front of an emu or an ostrich, you're like, that is a dinosaur. Or just birds in general. Deep sea creatures, I think that I would love to get a sense of how big, what is it? What's the name of the biggest whale? Is it a humpback whale that's the
I think
largest?
the
Or the
blue whale,
blue
I
whale? The
believe.
blue whale?
Yeah.
I I've seen pictures of like the comparison between the school bus and the blue whale, but I would like to get a sense of like actually seeing that in real life, what that would look like. Not necessarily seeing a blue whale, but a sense of scale. I'd be interested in.
I'd be right where I could. Yeah, that's one of those. What would you have been if not a horseman? Like I could probably have been a sailor and spend my life on a boat and been just fine and still be happy and everything out there.
That tracks.
So
You've already got the beard.
yeah, see, I'm halfway to sea captain right now. So
Oh,
absolutely. Okay, well that was our last question. So let me tabulate your score here. Ronnie, you're not going to believe this, but you're at 5,691 points, which makes you our high scorer of all time for this game. And as you may or may not know, that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment. Your choice.
well, hot damn. Um, that's very exciting. I'm a Leo, so I would love a compliment, but I think I'd rather embarrass you and pay you a compliment. Is that okay?
Go for it.
Um, I've been following Doffman horsemanship since probably 2016, 2017, and I found your information that you put out so useful, so practical. And I'll also say that whenever something comes up that I don't agree with, or maybe even makes me upset that you say, I can tell that you have such heart and regard for the horses that it's really, kept me around this long. And I'm really excited to keep learning from you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm also a Leo, but yes, being complimented is very awkward for me. So I hope you enjoy that. I'm sure I'm red as a beet right now. Uh, okay, well, first question we always go with is, would you give us kind of the 30,000-foot view of what you do? And for you, that's going to be a few different things. So feel free to expound on it.
Sure, yeah, my elevator pitch is a little convoluted. So I've been a horsewoman since I was 8. I did not have the chance to own horses or show horses or really have any formal training until later in life. It was very much a go out in the field with a rope halter and ride whatever I could catch. I it wasn't really in my awareness that I could become a horse trainer or do something in the equine industry. I'm not really sure why that didn't occur to me, other than I just wasn't around show barns and equine industry people. I was around a lot of horses, but not pros, I guess. So I went away to grad school, and or undergrad and grad school. I kind of dinked around and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I ended up landing as a major in speech language pathology because I had made deaf friends and learned American Sign Language. And I got pretty angry how deaf people were treated and sort of represented from a medical perspective. And so I became a speech therapist basically because my deaf friends tell me how bad their experience was in speech therapy growing up. And as that kind of relates back to my second career with horses, I think that it's kind of prepared me for being a little bit of a contrarian, being willing to go against the standard practices or be ready to kind of question things that because I said so sort of a situation. I kind of always knew that the goal was intertwining speech therapy with some kind of therapeutic riding or adaptive riding instruction. And I did that in 2019. I got my qualifications, and I have been working a full-time job, a 40-hour a week as a speech therapist, and doing another 25, 30 hours a week of horse stuff on top of that since 2019. So I'm a full-time horse hobbyist, part-time equine professional, full-time SLP.
So I was going to ask you about your origin story here with the speech pathology and all of that. I don't know what it is about it. When I was in school, and I don't know if this was unique to my college or what, but it seemed like every other girl you met was in speech pathology. Like it was half of the women on campus were
Yeah.
in that department. So I always kind of wondered about, like, is there that much of a need for that many, or 80% of these people going to be unemployed because this just the job market is flooded, or so. And I guess I generally think of that profession as working with children, but I have to say, for whatever reason, the sign language and deaf children specifically part of it never really occurred to me. I don't know why, but it didn't for whatever reason. So how the hell do you teach someone that can't hear sounds how to make proper sounds? Like that's an uphill. I don't know that I would even try to tackle that. Like that's something. So how do you go about that?
Well, I'll back up a minute. So in the US, this isn't the same in all countries, but in the US, speech language pathologists treat voice disorders, hearing disorders, speech disorders, language disorders, and swallowing disorders. So all of that is in our scope of practice. Now, some of us go off and only treat kids for articulation for the rest of our lives. Others go off and treat stroke patients in the hospital for the rest of their career and maybe never do articulation or speech therapy again for pediatric populations. I've spent most of my career with kids. I worked for a residential school for the deaf in Austin, one of the larger residential schools for the deaf in the country. And that exposed me to not only profoundly deaf kids who use ASL as their main way to communicate. They don't talk. They use sign language primarily. And then also kids with multiple disabilities. So kids who are deaf blind, deaf autistic, deaf with other motor disorders. about 40% of deaf individuals have some additional diagnosis. So I got pretty skilled with working with these complex cases, which is, I haven't done a ton of swallowing in my career compared to somebody who's gone off to do a career in a hospital, but I would say I'm a generalist in terms of treating dysphagia. I did a lot more when I first moved to Philadelphia, where there's a huge shortage of SLPs. There's actually a nationwide shortage. And I think I heard recently in a meeting that there are 1,500 kids waiting for services here in Philadelphia, just hanging out, waiting, desperately needing services, and there's no one available. But to your general impression, yes, SLPs tend to be like white type A ladies. So we're trying to change that a little bit in the field. Oh, but back to your question about deaf kids. I have spent most of my career working with kids where the goal is not speech, the goal is language, right? So can you tell me a story? Can you explain who and what happened, these types of basic grammar structures. We're doing that all in ASL. So I'm providing language therapy in sign language. Sometimes I'm doing speech, but I kind of hate speech therapy. It's kind of not my favorite thing. Actually, this week I had to do a speech therapy session for a hard of hearing kid, and he was just distraught. He was like, "Mom, I don't want to do speech. It's boring." And so I agree. Speech therapy is boring. I much prefer language therapy and more play-based therapy, which is why doing speech in an equine setting is so fun, because it doesn't feel the same as it does in a clinic or in school.
So how old were you when, or this is, I guess I'd never ask a lady her age kind of a thing, but I think it applies here. How old were you when you learned ASL?
I was 19. There was a really cute deaf guy in my community college class, and I learned ASL from him and his friends. I'm 34 now. And so, yeah, I've been signing for that long, and I have a high level of competency. I consider myself fluent, but, it's taken a long time.
I don't know why, but this is if this is inappropriate, then I apologize, but I kind of have to know now. So I assume with some of the different language pathologies, they have their own names, and this person that has the classic lisp that can't make the S sound or whatever. So what is it that Mike Tyson has? What would we call that?
I can't remember what Mike Tyson's speech sounds like. I know that he has a voice disorder. So he has he's basically a roarer.
Okay. With the one flat paralyzed type thing, that's what you mean?
I mean, he probably has vocal nodules or something that creates that very rough vocal quality. He has he replaces his R's with his W's, right?
I think his thing is a
TH. Okay, the TH?
Yeah.
I'd have to hear it. I'm not recalling.
So this is one of the jokes that I use to kind of crack crowds open when I have to do a presentation or something like that. And I'll give full disclosure here. I think it's a charming sort of a thing, but it's for me it is for them. I break my own ice with a joke and then I can go on. So this is one of the ones that I use on the flight over to this event. Your seat made on the plane and everything, and so I try to make a little small talk and all of that. And so I introduce myself, and he says his name is Jathan, and I'm very bad with names, so I use that little deal where you say their name 3 times in the sentence. So I go, well, it's nice to meet you, Jathan. That's a very interesting name you have there, Jathan. So you're the first Jathan I've ever met. Do you get a lot of stuff on that? And Jathan looks at me and he goes, "Are you serious right now?"
Yeah,
so there's one of my jokes.
It'd be an interdental lisp. So between the teeth, He's, instead of an S, he's replacing it with a TH. So that would be like a severe form of a lisp.
Okay, I think that's what Mike Tyson has. That's what was relevant about that joke. So.
I tell you, I could not give a shit about lisps. I have had so many arguments with parents that are like, but he's lisping. I'm like, this is not clinically relevant. He's going to be fine. I'm here for the kids who are non-speaking and have severe disabilities. Like, if you want to, you can go to private speech therapy and work on that. But a lot of the time, the kids aren't motivated. They will get motivated when they start getting made fun of or not. And who cares? So there's my radical SLP opinion.
No, I kind of agree. Like my kids are redheads, right? And so regardless, they're going to get picked on a little bit for that. And it's just part of their character and who they are. And I agree with you. A person with a lisp like that can still obviously communicate and get across everything they're trying to get across. So yeah, it's kind of a minor character aspect rather than a major life problem that needs to be fixed or else kind of thing. So
not a functional disability. It's not a functional disability.
So I guess here's another. If are you teaching kids sign language who are deaf, or like I would figure that parents would realize they have a deaf kid, learn sign language, teach the kid. So are you teaching sign language per se, or it's more the mental organization and structure of how to communicate properly? Like, I don't know, is sign language like Latin or the or French or something where the adjective could come before, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm just curious here. Not a horse question, but
yeah. No, thank you for asking. I could do another podcast about that. I'm actually presenting at American Speech and Hearing Association a couple of papers on this sort of topic. So definitely something I can nerd out about as well. So the main thing that I am looking for when I am evaluating and treating a signing deaf child is presence of language deprivation. So this is a phenomenon that occurs where you don't get exposure to a language, spoken or signed, within the critical period of learning for your brain. So if you don't get your hearing aids or your cochlear implants until you're a year old, you're going to start out with significant linguistic and cognitive deficits. And so it's kind of a neurodevelopmental emergency to get exposed to sign language as early as possible in life. But there's lots of barriers to that. Surprise, your newborn baby, you need to learn a new language for, and so the parents really struggle with resources to get access to free instruction and people who can help them and just like developing fluency and competency. Also, unfortunately, and this is what I kind of rail against, is there are a lot of doctors, speech therapists, audiologists, otolaryngologists that are out there telling parents of deaf children don't use sign language with them because they'll rely on it and they won't want to learn how to speak. And so this creates a lot of problems. I have treated children who have had no exposure to language, nothing, profoundly deaf, until they're 9, 12, 14, 20. And so those individuals have profoundly impacted life experiences. And so depending upon when you get exposure to speech or ASL, your capacity for learning, because of your capacity for learning language, is going to be profoundly impacted.
That boggles my mind that doctors would do that. Yeah, that seemed like if I was a parent in a room and a doctor said that to me, we're immediately going to find another doctor. Like that's obviously that really makes me sad for people that are dealing with that. I'm going to share an experience right now. And again, I don't know how much horses we're going to talk on this one, but so April and I have, she was one of, and she doesn't really want to be named, so I'm not going to give too many details, but we have a member of our family who's a speech pathologist. She was one of the people that helped me on the original bit video, and I learned a ton of stuff about tongue function and swallowing and all of that stuff. from her. One of the suggestions that she threw out there when we first had Wyatt was baby signs, and I think she gave us a baby sign language book, and so we did. And by the time he was 1, he probably knew like 30 different sign language deals, and by the time he was 1.5, it was over 100. And it really, it practically changed a lot of the things in his development. Like, I know when it did slow the words. So when we were at the pediatrician and we were doing the tests that is he doing crawling, rolling over at a certain age and all that stuff, he was saying fewer words than most kids at that age, not by a lot, but if you threw in there the sign language that he knew, the ability to communicate, it was way beyond the norm. And it really changed, like the terrible twos temper tantrums. We learned that a lot of that is actually because the kid knows what they want, but they have an inability to express what they want. And then the parents, like, I don't know what you want, but you teach him sign language and he could say, I don't want milk, I want juice. Or, all kinds of little nuances that he wouldn't have had the neurological development to say, but he could now communicate through sign language. So his terrible twos were nowhere near as terrible as a lot of other kids. And I don't know if he remembers any of that. I don't know. I can remember more. I guess that was kind of the most. He was a heavy eater for little kids, so we did more an awful lot. But anyway, there's something. If there is anyone out there who is about to have a kid or has a young kid, I could not more highly recommend something parent-wise than doing baby sign language. It was one of the best decisions we ever made as parents with our kids, for sure. So I hadn't thought about that in a while because they're old now, but anyway.
Yeah, that's great. I would just add that if parents are interested, make sure that you're learning from deaf adults, deaf individuals. We don't want to be supporting businesses that are, hearing people that are maybe I don't want to be supporting businesses that are hearing people kind of appropriating American Sign Language. I would rather it be people who have that cultural background. There's deaf families that are multi-generational, like maybe my grandpa, my great-grandparents were deaf. And so it just, I think, is kind of an ethical thing to make sure that you're learning from the deaf community and giving back to the deaf community. If you're interested in baby sign, which I use all the time in therapy with hearing kids, that would just be my 2 cents.
I've never really thought about that. And as you said, I have no idea. I mean, we had a book, that's what we went by, but where it came from or who wrote it or whatever, I don't have a clue. So
probably easier with social media nowadays to go look for good ASL instruction.
So with, I guess we're just going to talk about the speech pathology stuff with people for a little while here. So with your friends that were the nexus of your journey here, talking about their lives and how hard it was. It seems to me, I don't know if this is more recent or what, but I see a lot of sign language interpreters now, like concerts, comedy shows, politicians. There seem to actually be a lot of places where there's an interpreter right there doing the ASL and all of that stuff. So is that pretty new and a major improvement for them in quality of life, be part of everything going on, or what are some of the might face?
I think that there is a huge interpreter shortage in life and death scenarios, like hospitals and legal cases, and also in the educational setting. There's still a major lack of resources in terms of those like very critical times to have access to an interpreter. I think it's great that we have more public exposure to sign language through interpreters, but it's a little bit more face value than addressing some of the resource concerns that a lot of people have. I also have friends that are certified deaf interpreters, So there's a service model where the hearing interpreter might sign the spoken language, and then that would be additionally translated by a second deaf interpreter to match the communication needs of the individual. So that person may have language deprivation. So they might have difficulty understanding language at all. A certified deaf interpreter has a lot of training and experience with communication, period, and also being able to break down language, extrapolate on things, show examples, take the time that it takes to break something down and explain something to someone who has difficulty with language. And I want to make it clear too that language is separate from cognition. This is something that I think about a lot when I hear bad riding instructors, is when they are screaming at someone, they might be able to hear your words, but they're not processing it, or, and it's also separate parts of the brain, how you express yourself versus how you understand language. So totally different areas of the brain where we process language and when our intellect is, and also our receptive versus our expressive language capacities.
Yeah, yelling more leg louder for the 87th time is probably a sign that it's not getting through somewhere, right? So they need a different way of going about that.
Yep.
So this is something this is gonna sound like a joke, but I'm genuinely curious because I have the practical analytical mind. So we're mixing deaf children with horses and ASL. And as a guy who, teaches about bits, there's reins, which involve hands, and then there's ASL, which involves hands. And I'm seeing a comedy of what the hell's going on here occur. So how does that practically work out? I mean,
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I have to, like, do not talk back to me right now. Like, stop your horse. And I have had kids try to sign with reins in their hands. I'm like, stop, don't do that to your horse. So, I mean, I have to modify my instruction a lot, right? Like, I cannot stand in the middle of the arena and yell at the kids or adults. What I do is I think about positioning a lot. So if I have a kiddo going down the long side, I say kiddo, I have adult students as well. If I have a rider going down the long side, I position myself so that I'm in their line of vision coming down the long side, and I can give instruction about, you need more leg here, or you need to bend here, or whatever the, feedback is. I also have to be really good at explaining concepts. I've been in riding lessons before where the style is kind of like, give up your personal will and do as your instructor says, like you learn through doing. And that's not going to work with somebody who communicates visually. You need to be able to explain what you want, have them go execute, which, go with the grace of God. Like sometimes there's been scary moments there because I can't give that feedback, that important feedback in the moment. So I just have to be really aware of where my rider's line of vision is, run around, really make it so that, it's a workout for me so that they can see me. If there's a critical moment, we're going to go over a jump or we're doing a pattern of some kind. Like, I just have to be very mindful of where I am in the arena. And yes, I make it a rule that you're not allowed to sign with reins in your hands. If you have a question, you can wait.
So I'm also curious. This is I wasn't sure how this conversation was going to go. This is a lot more fun, and I'm just having little curiosity thoughts popping off everywhere. So I apologize if this is chaotic, but I'm going to take advantage and satisfy my curiosity here.
Right.
So you've talked about processing a little bit. I'm a person. I have had some hearing problems for years, and I have kind of come to believe through some research and stuff that I've done, I'm kind of self-diagnosing myself as actually having auditory processing disorder. And so it is more a thing because I hear sounds very well. If
Yeah.
I'm in the woods or something, you're not going to sneak up on me. But I have trouble distinguishing language, especially like if there's background noise and that sort of stuff. That I say what and ask people to repeat themselves, all day long. It's
Mhm.
pretty frustrating. So on the processing end of things, do you work with that kind of thing very
Yeah,
much? So
constantly.
how is
And I'll
there
ask you a
hope? Is
follow-up
there
question.
improvement there?
I'll
Okay.
just ask you a follow-up question regarding your hearing difficulties. So speech discrimination is different than sound discrimination, and that is both uh, difficult from an auditory perspective as well as a processing perspective. And so it might be that you're experiencing some presbycusis. Is this something that has gotten worse as you've gotten older, that it's harder for you to hear speech and noise?
Yeah, definitely. But
That
I
would
have
not.
had it my whole life.
Oh, okay. It's just gotten.
So yeah, like I know that I don't hear as well. It's definitely happening. But like my wife has a constant source of amusement from me, because I always it just it's a never ending deal of her learning that I have the wrong words in my mind for lots and lots of songs out there, and she gets a new little nugget of that. What did you say? That's not what the lyrics are, and I'm like, we've met. You should know what's going on by now. um, so we have a lot of inside jokes based upon me knowing the wrong words to tons of songs out there.
That's a thing in
Anyway,
my too.
so I'm kind of curious about this with you. We haven't ever talked about this in lessons or anything, but I would imagine you kind of talked about, I forgot exactly the words you used, but maybe deaf interpreter.
Mhm.
I'm going to assume part of that comes down to some specialized understanding of body language. And body language is something I get very deep in with horses. So I am curious if you find having a more organized or maybe a more full understanding of body language as an actual language, do you find that as a secret superpower with horses sometimes, like you're more aware of things than most people would be in what this horse is trying to communicate because you're used to communication that doesn't involve English, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I want to go back to your processing question in a minute, so don't let us forget that. But what
Okay,
you're talking about is
sure, sure.
a linguistic term called pragmatics, or basically like the rules of your culture of body language and also proximity. Proxemics is another study related to how individuals relate to one another. In other cultures, it might be more normal to speak more closely to someone's face, where in other cultures you wouldn't do that and you would expect more space between bodies. Um, I think that not so much my like graduate classes, but like actually feet on the ground communicating with people who have very different life experiences than I do and communication abilities than I do has definitely carried over to horses. I think that they are communicating so much with us constantly. It's hard for us to take in all of the communication that they're offering sometimes. But I think that I'm pretty good in my instruction of pointing out to people who are missing communication, using that skill of observation that I have from not just, what was the communication on the surface words wise, but what are all of the ways that the person is already communicating. That's one thing that we do with non-speaking individuals when we're first introducing like an augmentative communication device, like an iPad. You can press buttons to make it talk. You talk about all of the ways they're already communicating. So they might, point, or they might lead you by the hand over to the thing that they want. It's about us learning all of the ways they're already communicating. It's not about us getting them to talk, or us getting the horse to show us with a particular cue what it is that they want. We need to develop our skills of kind of global gestalt communication observation.
Yeah, I apologize. This is going to be chaotic, but you're giving me thoughts just sparking off everywhere here. So here's one I'm going to forget if I don't say it right now. Extroverts versus introverts. I would imagine that you have more deaf people who are introverted as the norm, and I'm kind of curious there on the nature nurture side, but I'm not going to ask you about that. But if you were to have a deaf person who is extroverted, do their arms get tired?
Oh man, I don't know that I would agree that deaf people are introverted.
Well, it's not like I know a ton of them. It's an assumption I'm
Yeah.
making, but I could very well be wrong. And they
Yeah,
may,
I mean,
when
there's
they find someone
introverted.
to communicate with, maybe it's like this joyous release, and they just got
Yeah,
a whole lot they want to say. Maybe
yeah,
so.
yeah. Oh, it's a huge thing in deaf culture. Like the term deaf goodbye means that it takes an hour to leave the gathering because, you have so much to say. And Yeah, so that's definitely a thing. It's also kind of a stereotype that people who sign are angry, like they might be using a lot of facial expressions and appear more agitated than they actually are. They're just using facial expressions to convey stuff.
So we talked about body language a second ago. I haven't had any formal training. I do feel like I am, probably because of the horses and the cows and all of that, I'm a lot more attuned to body language in people than most people are. And so one of the things, like if you had to categorize one of those phrases that you've said 1,000 times, this would be one of them for me. I'll ask someone a question and they tell me yes verbally, but everything else about them is screaming no. And so I have said 1,000 times, okay, that was actually a no. And so let's talk about why it was. And then, we have a side conversation. So I have found the body language part of that pretty useful, and hopefully save some people from stepping into the deep end of the pool that they were really not ready for. So I don't know why I felt like I needed to say that. I guess I've been wanting to get that off of my chest for a long time, but I think the body language part of that, that there's the saying that 80% of communication is nonverbal. And
Mhm.
so if what we're really talking about is language and communication, that seems like that's got to be a pretty big. And then you were just talking about the hands and the angry expression. I mean, I would just think they're just trying to emphasize, like they're talking in bold at that moment, right? They're trying to be a little louder, a little more animated, little whatever, and
Yeah.
maybe that looks aggressive to the outside observer, but that's all they're trying to do, add some emphasis here.
Yeah, it's like being
um
Italian.
uh-huh
Or or
I saw
the
a funny video on that.
Or the first time I met my in-laws, I was like, why is everyone angry? What's going on? And they're not angry. That's just, they're kibitzing. They're chattering, talking over one another. That's their family culture. So, there's differences across everyone in terms of affect, like how the face appears.
Mhm. um well, I have a note here before I get too far down in my notes onto something else. You said you wanted to talk more about the auditory processing disorder, so I'll.
So if I had one thing that I could share with other riding instructors that I've learned about working with people with, lots of different types of communication needs is use visuals. Visuals are processed in a different part of the brain as language and speech is. If anyone would like to contact me for printable visuals to use with kids they might be working with adults they might be working with that seem like they're struggling to understand verbal instruction, using a visual is a really powerful tool to bypass that communication sort of hiccup through the brain. Also, practice yourself as an instructor doing things with your body, like get out a stick horse and like make the half pass this way and show physically what it is that you're doing with your body that you want your rider to do. Because I know that I've been in lessons where I've been getting a lot of verbal instruction and not enough embodied understanding of what I need to do in order to influence my horse. And so use visuals, use tactile cues. That would be the biggest thing that I would say in terms of that auditory processing difficulty. Because the second we get on a horse, maybe we're a little nervous, maybe it's a high pressure situation, our capacity for understanding and hearing speech and language is going to go down, because it's going to have, our cognitive load is taking care of other things like adrenaline.
I've seen the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies not know their left from their right when they get in the saddle. Right. It's a real thing for sure. That would be another one of those. Know your other left. I could not begin to tell you how many times I have said that through the years. So this is what wasn't something I was planning on asking you about, but I think it kind of fits in here. Have you ever messed with any deaf horses? And I have not. I have some friends who have, and we kind of have, that's a growing thing in the horse world right now. So, so you have not?
Mm-mm.
I would think that would really change some things. I mean, I really, I know I kiss a lot, and a lot of times it just kind of means, hey, pay attention. I'm trying to get you to focus a little more here. And if you took that away from me, it would be a tool I would miss. So just curious there.
I have a friend who shared with me that they have a deaf horse, quarter horse, I think, pleasure background. I think that there's bloodlines that they've got strong congenital deafness in horses, in some of those Western performance horses. But she says that this horse smells a lot, uses sense of smell. And I know that Endo, the blind horse, also smells a lot. So it's interesting how when we have sensory impairments, our brain looks for information from other senses.
And here's Daniel wandering around England smelling rocks and grass and trees. So that maybe, yep. That's my other sense that's taking over for me. Well, let's get into the horses a little bit more and talk about your specialty here and kind of how it would how it changes things in horses and the swallowing and tongues and larynx and pharynx and all of the various structures involved there. And I'm honestly not real sure of exactly how to ask you a question, lead you into that pool. So I'm just going to inarticulately throw the ball to you and say, go. How about that?
Well, sure. I guess I can reference your work first. I have watched the video about 2 years ago. I reviewed that material and I was really excited that someone else was concerned about riding behind the vertical, and riding with a lot of contact and compression in the mouth. These are questions that I've asked myself as a rider, someone who was trained with a more of a dressage background. And having my swallowing speech language pathology lens, had a lot of curiosity about what that was doing in the body, and some of the things that I learned about, you need to have 2 wrinkles in the corner of the mouth as you place the bit, and a foamy mouth is healthy. And it's okay to have 40 pounds of contact in your hands if you're helping your horse get to being lighter on the other side. Sometimes they just need to go that way. You need to support your horse through, giant forearms and biceps. And yeah, it's just a curiosity that I have. I also have been pretty seriously studying equine bodywork since 2021. And I attended an equine dissection with Lori Muller of Trinity Equine Services this past February. She's a doctor of osteopathy. And I was just super excited by the head and neck. I kind of had to like bide my time as we got through distal limbs and whatnot. I was just like head and neck, head and neck, head and neck. And so I'm very excited to join your next cohort of masterclass people. I think that bit fitting and learning more about what we can do to help horses be more comfortable with bits is a great progression for me in my bodywork career. And, eventually I'd like to move towards being more full-time in the horse industry. Right now, I'm kind of full-time SLP, part-time horses, and I'd kind of like to flip that a little bit. I love practicing speech pathology, but working in education or in the medical system is pretty gnarly at times. So I'm interested to sort of grow my practical competency with being able to work with horses around bits. And then also, I guess what I would say is my question is, what are the long-term effects of riding with contact like this behind the vertical, tongue is numb, you have a lot of pressure on the larynx and the parotid gland and the guttural pouch because of the position of the jaw and the chin. I guess I'll stop there for now. Maybe the one more thing that I would say is I have seen young horses go in FEI classes, like the 4 and 5-year-old classes, kind of being put falsely in these frames. And to me, the horses look ataxic. They look like they've had a stroke. And I just wonder, because of all of the critical cranial nerves that you're disturbing when you're riding this way, what is that horse's lifespan going to look like? What are the complications that are going to come up as a result of bad riding?
So that's a lot to address. I'll say that my background is in the 2-year-old futurity world and that sort of thing, and there's a lot of claims made about that and how starting them early and all of that stuff. Anecdotally, in my experience, I have not seen any of those claims really validated. I've been doing this long enough where the first horses I started are dead of old age at this point, and so I have more than a horse's lifespan worth of experience. And yeah, there have been some horses that had some soundness issues and wound up retired due to physical issues, but it's been a small percentage of them. It has certainly not been the majority. I've had tons of them that I kept track of and know of that went into their teens and 20s and all of that
So you
stuff,
don't
even
ride
though they
with
were
both
started
on
as a
contact,
2-year-old.
do you?
Oh, not much, no. I
Right.
mean, a little bit, yeah. So I'm just setting up a comparison here.
Yeah.
Probably the disciplinary group of horses that I have worked with the most that are chronically dealing with physical health problems is dressage. And then second behind that would be the hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly, the eventers, I haven't worked with nearly as many, and they're the ones like you're thinking a crazy wild ride across the countryside, and they're jumping these huge things and downhill and all. I've seen less problems with those horses than I have the pure hunters and the pure dressage horses. So I think that, and dressage is, the background there is gymnastics. It's supposed to be all about for the building and the health of the horse. And
Right.
I have a lot of friends that are in the classical world, and that really is what they're focused on. But in the show world, I think dressage is at a low point
Yeah.
right now from exactly the sorts of things that you are describing. So, what are the long-term effects of behind the vertical and that sort of riding? I think that you will very commonly find horses with problems in the pole area and the lumbar sacral area. Those seem to be, for my mind, of the ones I've dealt with, those are kind of the 2 points that like 80% of them have got one or both going on by the time they're 10 or 12. So I think riding behind the vertical is one of the singularly most damaging things that we can do to a horse that's completely within our control.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot of structures there, and let me talk a little bit about one of the major differences between horses and people, because a lot of people don't realize this, and the sort of the magnified effects of it. Physiologically, horses are what's known as obligate nose breathers. So horses cannot pant like a dog. They can't breathe in and out of their mouth. They only can breathe through their nose. So if any of you have heard some claims like the World Bitless Association and Dr. Cook and Dr. Clayton and all on their research papers talking about bits negatively affecting respiration of horses, that has the potential to be true, but only when things are pretty much at an extreme of dysfunction. And where it becomes true is either if we have the horse behind the vertical, or if we have really cranked on the tongue and caused the tongue to become defensive. Because a horse is an obligate nose breather, the reason that, or the way that that works, is in the back of the throat. We have the soft palate and the epiglottis, and they form a seal in the back of the mouth. So one of the things I'll hear sometimes is that there is no such thing as a mouth seal, and that is equivocally wrong. It's not kind of wrong, it's extremely wrong. It's absolutely wrong. So the mouth seal is twofold. It occurs at the lips in the front of the mouth, but it also is in the throat at the back. If the mouth seal didn't exist, a horse would drown the very first time it drank a piece of water. you know, I mean, that seal has to exist in the back of the throat, particularly for horses, because it's like railroad tracks where they're shifting from this track to that track. They're gonna have the airway, the trachea open, or the esophagus, but never both. So it's gonna have to shift in the back of the throat. So if we cause a horse to either be behind the vertical or to have a defensive tongue reaction, the tongue will push up on the soft palate and epiglottis seal and break it. And now, as
Okay.
the horse is trying to breathe, what's that?
Are you talking about so you're talking about the velopharyngeal wall, that being the seal in the back of the throat prior to the epiglottis elevating or dropping over the airway?
Yes.
Okay. Got
And so what you're talking about there, this is also there's a pretty strong correlation and a lot of research that's gone back and forth between some of the respiratory problems that horses can have in snoring. So that's kind of what you're talking about, when that rear flap, if it becomes a little too floppy and not as stiff as it's supposed to be, then when the air passes through there rather than sealing, we have it now flapping and making noise. So there's generally, people would think of a horse that's a roarer, and that's actually paralysis of part of the trachea back there, or not the trachea, but it's the left.
I think that
Spacing
that's
on it right now,
dysfunction of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So the nerve, one of the nerves that innervates the larynx, that can be a cause of roaring. I've heard of people doing tie-back surgery where they do open one of the vocal folds, or the things that bang together to make phonation, make
and
voice.
it's always one. I think it's the left side, but it's always the left or the right that the problem exists in.
Yeah.
So that would be separate from the mouth seal of what we're talking about with the epiglottis and the soft palate. So that's a problem a little further down the chain. But I've kind of lost my train of thought. But the mouth seal is essential to have And even though we call it a mouth seal, if the mouth seal isn't functioning correctly, then it is interfering with respiration, because the bottom side of the seal is the mouth, but the top side of it is the horse's airway and them trying to breathe. So like that's one of the ways that we can have a white foamy mouth, is if we have affected that seal as the horse exhales. Now air is going into the mouth where it's not supposed to, instead of out the nostrils. And so we have air introduction into saliva, and that can be one of the ways we have problems. The way that the hyoid apparatus works in the horse, that's really the problem with having them behind the vertical. The hyoid apparatus is a series of 7 bones that it's kind of like a little trapeze or something that the tongue ties into back there. It has cartilage that goes directly into the thyroid and the epiglottis, and all kinds of connections that go throughout the horse down to the sternum, the shoulders. Fascia goes from it literally to the hocks. It affects every part of the horse. But as you get a horse behind the vertical, all of the structures, soft structures that are holding the hyoid apparatus are picking up on it, which essentially lifts the tongue up into that soft palate epiglottis area and breaks that seal. So there's no functional way to have a horse behind the vertical and not negatively affect a bunch of structures and things that go through there. You were talking about cranial nerves. So the 10th cranial nerve is the vagus nerve, and it runs right down through that complex. It's the main parasympathetic nervous system nerve. It runs right through the hyoid apparatus, down the throat area, straight to the heart. And so if you cause tension in that area, you affect a whole lot of things, way more than we tend to appreciate. You mentioned the parotid salivary gland, so that's another one of the reasons we can get white foam and all of that stuff. I, in the consultations and stuff that I do, I pretty commonly see inflamed parotid salivary glands. You can see them even like when the horse is not at work, before they're riding, when they're tacking him up, you'll see it in that moment. And I already know what the problem's going to be here. I can't say that I've personally really had guttural pouch issues come up. I think of that more with infectious disease and that sort of a thing. But just because I haven't explored that yet doesn't mean that it hasn't been a part of the picture either, So I've just gone on way too long, but the answer is, yeah, a whole lot of stuff happens. And it's, I think it's a lot more common with some of these horses that have been in these bad positions for years to actually have nerve damage problems than we tend to think. This total dysfunction of the tongue and things like that are going on and are unfortunately not repairable when it gets to that level.
Yeah.
So
I was corresponding this week with Dr. Kevin Hausler, who runs the Veterinary Compendium Learning Library. He's a veterinarian and a chiropractor and has a lot of other really impressive qualifications, but he was very kind to answer some questions for me about this question of like, what are the immediate effects and what are the long-term effects of oral discomfort and bit discomfort? And so the term I'll use for swallowing disorders is called dysphagia. That's, the difficulty swallowing. Swallowing is a complex neurological function. You need multiple areas of the brain and multiple cranial nerves involved in order to coordinate the safe transfer of bolus, liquid or solid bolus material, over the airway down into the esophagus. And my understanding is that it's a little bit more difficult for horses to aspirate, which is have material that's not supposed to go into the airway, but it can happen. I was reading a couple of studies on equine dysphagia. One was a study of 182 horses, and about 50% of those horses actually did show aspiration pneumonia, so respiratory infections as a result of chronic material passing into the airway and into the lungs. It does seem that the majority of those horses, like the reason why they were there, they were presenting with megaesophagus, so an enlarged portion of the esophagus, which would to me, say that the main reason why horses are struggling with swallowing difficulties, that coordination of transferring material into the esophagus safely, has a bigger gastrointestinal impact than it does airway disorder impact. But there was presence of both in this study that I read. And to your point regarding the importance of saliva and preparing a bolus for this safe transfer, I would just encourage the listeners for a minute while we're talking, don't swallow. Okay, ready, go. Don't swallow. Don't swallow. Pull your tongue back as if you were avoiding the bit. Don't swallow. Pull your tongue back. And so, you already feel that's uncomfortable. And we need intraoral pressure. We need there to be enough compression of the bolus material in order for it to go into not a spread out kind of piecemeal shape. We want it to be consolidated enough that it can safely travel over the airway. When we're constantly putting pressure on the larynx and the hyoid, in a minute, I'll go over some of the terminology, but if we're constantly putting pressure and tension on these structures, how are we going to get them to relax completely to safely swallow? And from what Dr. Hausler has shared with me is that it's very possible for us to be causing long-term dysphagia, discoordination of the swallowing function in horses as a result of oral facial pain. And there's a bunch of different impacts that we might see. It sounds like from this literature that I've just reviewed that the primary thing that you would see is gastrointestinal issues, so colic, which we see all the time.
So I did want to ask you, you had mentioned the dissection, and I was going to ask you about that. And I still will. Let me say this before I forget about it. One of the things that I did for the online bit course that we're doing, I had access to a horse that needed to be put down, and I bought the horse and put it down, and I kind of did it as I was going to dissect him, and so I removed the tongue and the hyoid apparatus from the horse, and post euthanasia. Let me make that clear. And this is at a point. This was a year ago, a little over a year ago. I've been studying this stuff for years. Okay, years. I was utterly shocked when I actually got in there to do the dissection. And I'm a lifelong hunter. I've cut a bunch of animals up and stuff. I know where the structures are in a horse. I was being very careful, I thought. I actually broke one of the hyoid bones in the process of trying to remove that, even though I know where they are, what I was doing, and was being extra careful not to. Which gave me a real appreciation for just how fragile all of that stuff is. One of the other things that I will say when I got to playing with the backside of the hyoid apparatus, of the cartilage and all of that stuff, I was utterly shocked at how small the esophagus of a horse is. It's like the size of your index finger. That's it. It is little bitty. You think about a horse and all the swallowing that they do, their esophagus is the size of your 3 inches across or something. So the trachea is the windpipe. The esophagus is what they're swallowing to transverse food down to the stomach. But it is tiny. When I saw that, I'm like, how does every horse not choke every day? I mean, I would have thought the esophagus was at least double the size. I knew it wasn't huge, but like seeing it in real life right there, I was shocked at how small it was. I really was. So what did you learn from your dissection experience there?
Well, I'll just say that the esophagus is a muscular structure, so that it may be that it expands some than when it's empty, when you and I were dissecting. But yes, that was the major concern for the horses included in this study, were esophageal phase swallowing dysfunction. When we're diagnosing dysphagia swallowing disorders, We look at problems in the oral phase, which would be chewing and transferring with the tongue. That can, be disrupted. The pharyngeal phase, which would be the period of transfer of the food or liquid material over the airway back into the esophagus. That's your pharynx, is that area where that transfer occurs. And then your esophageal phase, you can have things go wrong there with peristalsis, with the muscles that slowly squeeze the bolus down. One thing that I was talking about with, again, Lori Muller regarding horses that are prone to choke is, once that esophagus gets stretched out or has some kind of stricture, it's really hard to have horses safely be able to eat hard foods. Also, the horse's physiology is such that it's more horizontal than humans. We're, more vertical, so gravity is on our side in terms of being able to get things to go down. And one recommendation that, I'm not a vet, talk to your vet. But if you have a horse that you're concerned might choke again because they've recently had choke, that's the biggest, risk factor for choke is if they've already choked. Feeding them slightly at or above knee height might be more appropriate than feeding them on the ground hard food, because you're giving a little bit of a support with that horizontal nature of the esophagus. Positioning and food texture modification are the first two lines of defense in treating dysphagia. First, we're going to think about how is your body positioned. It's not safe to swallow with your head tipped back. And also, what are the types of textures that you're eating? Are you eating a mixed texture like a chili, or are you eating something that's smooth and very homogeneous? Are you eating something that is very thin and slippery and liquidy? Or are you eating something that's sticky and will stick together and consolidate more easily? So thinking about all of these things might be useful for working with your vet if you have a horse who's choked and you're concerned about might choke again.
So two things. One there, first of all, I applaud the Texan in you for slipping chili into this conversation in some way, shape, or form. I was expecting like a little parentheses, no beans, and then you'd go on. So a little disappointed that didn't happen, but
because I'm
anyway,
a blasphemer, I use beans in my chili.
Good, cheap protein source. Nothing wrong with that, right? So you're mentioning horizontal swallowing. I would say even most of the time it's non-horizontal, it's uphill. Like if a horse is drinking out of a pond, they're swallowing liquid up,
yeah.
not, and think about that. If you were to like get on a bed or something, you're laying on your belly on the bed and you have a cup on the ground with a straw and you lean over the bed and try to swallow, that's obviously going to be an awkward, and that's the norm of the horse, is to actually swallow up above gravity. If anybody has ever looked in a horse's mouth and noticed the ridges on the roof of the mouth, those are there kind of to ladder chain up the food as they move it up with their tongue, and now the roof gives them that mechanism to hold it there where gravity doesn't take it right down. So a little bonus weird fact for you.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So was there anything else in the dissection that surprised you or that satisfied you, or anything that kind of stands out?
Yeah, I'd say two things. The first thing I'd say is Lori very graciously actually let me dissect part of the adenoid cartilage and, hold the trachea and the tongue and the hyoid apparatus. And there's some photos of me gleefully, sticking my hand through the pharynx and whatnot. And I had been told, I don't know who told me this, or it seems kind of silly, but someone had told me that horses can't aspirate because they're obligate nose breathers. And that's not true at all. Horses have a pharyngeal cavity the same as we do. So it's totally possible for horses to aspirate, again, meaning that something's going down the wrong pipe. And then the other thing that I think I take away from the dissection is I've just gotten really squeamish about seeing horses with flash nosebands, period, bits fitting incorrectly. I've just gotten, I think, seeing the structures underneath the skin. And that was kind of the only part of the dissection that I felt a little bit not squeamish, but emotional about. I think that there's something about the face that's very personal. I look at my horse's beautiful faces and look in their eyes. And so that when we, removed the head and started looking at some of these cranial structures, I think that was just kind of my emotional response was, wow, there's so much here. It's really, really valuable real estate. And we're treating it like Grand Central Station in terms of our use of aids. And I think that if we were to better distribute across other parts of the horse's body in terms of communication. And I love riding with bits. I love riding in connection with contact. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but I think that just like the profound respect of that valuable real estate, I would say, was a takeaway from the dissection.
So one thing that I wanted to talk about, you brought up aspiration and all of that. Most people have probably at some point watched a vet pass a stomach tube into a horse, like if you've had that colic and they're gonna put some oil in them or something. For those of you that are my age or older, before we had these paste dewormers that you could pick up at the store, you would have the vet come deworm your horses, and that meant they were going to put a gallon of pretty toxic crap down a stomach tube. And so when the vet's passing the stomach tube through the nose, seems like an odd place to go to the stomach through the nose, right? Why wouldn't you go through the mouth? This is what they're doing. When they get to that point, they shove it in about a foot, and now they're below it on the end of the tube, and it's like they're fishing around. Their eyes are looking at the sky. They're very much concentrating. Don't talk to me right now. No. That's the real estate they're navigating right there, that pharyngeal cavity, and making sure that we're not about to put a gallon of dewormer in lungs or something like that. So,
a lot of individuals have laryngeal injury as a result of intubation, and I'm imagining it's the same as horses. And so you might have either temporary or a chronic swallowing difficulty because of, an injury related to intubation, emergency intubation.
So why don't you, like we talked about the pharynx and you mentioned the larynx a minute ago. Would you kind of define those for us a little bit? What's the difference in all, because they rhyme, and so it's hard to keep track of what's what.
So if we are thinking about the critical structures related to equine swallowing, we have the tongue, which rests on and is mediated by the bone, the hyoid apparatus. We also have the larynx, which is the voice box. This holds your vocal folds. When those two cartilages press together and air goes through it, we get voice, phonation. So the first step of swallowing is actually the adduction of your vocal folds so that those snap shut and cover the airway. When a swallow is triggered, the tongue lifts up to prepare the bolus to be transferred through the pharynx. The pharynx is the cavity above the voice box where that transfer of material happens. We have the epiglottis, which is a flap of cartilage. What did you call it? Like the devil's tongue or something? It's a mean little...
It looks like it's a little pointed, looks like Beelzebub's tongue or something, little pointed, demonic looking, yeah. It's like a second little tongue in the back of the throat. I mean, it's a nasty looking little thing.
Yes. That folds closed over the voice box, the larynx. So you have two protections for the airway. You have the closing of the vocal folds, and you have the epiglottis flopping down over the larynx in order to safely move material over the airway and not to have it put in the airway. So I have been around horses who have had tieback surgery. That's where one of their airway protection mechanisms has been removed, so they can't close their two vocal folds together because they've kept it open to prevent roaring. I've also seen horses have epiglottis entrapment. So the cartilage gets kind of stuck in a funky position. The veterinary recommendation that I heard for dealing with epiglottis entrapment is putting the horse in roll cur briefly to try to free that up. To me, that seems like kind of a bad idea. I don't know, what thoughts do you have on that?
I'm not sure. I mean, if like there would be human um like PT things that you would do where you would force someone to do something kind of unnatural in order to strengthen this or strengthen this. So if we looked at it from that way and it was prescribed by a veterinarian that knew what they were doing, I mean, I'd try it and see. I don't think 30 minutes behind the vertical for 3 months would be reasonable. But if we're doing a carrot stretch kind of a thing here where, we go high and in, then I'd be okay with that. So
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we do have a maneuver for safe swallowing called a chin tuck maneuver, where basically you just tuck your chin as you're swallowing. But really, the purpose of that is to create that pressure enough so that it can transfer safely. So I don't know if that applies in the instance of a epiglottal entrapment. Uh,
interesting. So one of the other parts that I would say here is I liked what you asked everybody to do a few minutes ago about the tongue withdrawal and forcing themselves to not swallow. We in the bit course we do some things like that to give you little I call them empathy experiments to recognize. One of the things that I try to teach people is that your horse should, in order for them to be functional, they should continue at a normal rate of swallowing throughout a ride. And so you need, if in order to monitor that, that means through your hands, you need to be aware of, looking for, and feeling, my horse just moved their tongue and swallowed. And it's not a necessarily easy thing to do, but if you do develop that feel and that awareness, I assure you, your level of horsemanship is about to jump several notches in the course of a month, just going through that process and becoming aware of that and having that empathy for your horse. And part of it that I talk about a lot is the parasympathetic sympathetic involvement of the swallowing reflex and all of that. If which I won't rehash right now, but anyway.
I'm curious, Daniel, have you ever found any references to swallowing in classical texts?
Nothing is jumping out at me right now. I have honestly not. Most of the reading and stuff that I have done in the last decade has been on human psychology, so I really haven't read classical stuff in quite a while. I probably need to go brush back up on a bunch of it, but nothing is coming to mind. Boucher does talk a lot about stuff with his jaw releases and all, but honestly, there are some aspects of that I don't agree with. Like
Yeah.
I would not want to ride a horse that is hinging their jaw open in response to pressure from the bit. I would consider that an evasion and a problem and so forth. And I think we do kind of misinterpret some of the things he was trying to get across, maybe for our own convenience or excuse of our poor habits. But anyway, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now.
I found several references if you'd be interested.
Yeah.
I've recently been exposed to instruction by someone who was schooled in Baucherist tradition from the Cadre Noir in Saumur, France. And so I've been kind of furiously reading about session de mâchoire, the jaw flexions, from a riding perspective as well as from a swallowing perspective. So I've got my stack of books here, and I've found multiple references to what you've just talked about, that feeling of the horse swallowing in your hands, in Rassenay and in Favrot de Kerbrock's book. General de Carpentry talks about swallowing. But my favorite one is Etienne Boudon, who was not a direct student of Baucherist. He actually picked up Baucherist's teachings and read them, and then was able to apply them and was considered a great savant horseman of his time. To me, that's a little bit even more impressive because I know that I've learned a lot of things by doing what my teacher does, not what they say. So it's sort of a good proof of the method if you can pick up the book and do what the book says. And but this is in French, so you'll have to excuse my rough translation. But the mobility of the mouth is not a set of movements that are convulsive, short, or chomping of the jaw. You don't want the tongue to produce a clicking sound of the bits. You want the movement to be supple, discreet, relaxed, a tongue that moves a few millimeters, comme pour une déglutation, as if for a swallow, with a jaw that opens slightly, with the bit creating a discrete murmur. So I thought that you might appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah, I do like that. I will have to listen for the discrete murmur part. That may be the only part of that I'm a little puzzled on. But the rest of it I like. And I don't want to, we are kind of talking dressage here, and I try not to just shit on dressage, but I wasn't involved in that world at all at this point, so I didn't witness, but I suspect pretty strongly that there was kind of a fork in the road somewhere in the 90s where classical dressage was left behind in the modern show dressage stuff. So to be honest, when I am looking for pictures of or whatever dysfunction, I have found over the years that if I add the word dressage there, my search goes much quicker because all the pictures they want to show are problematic typically. But you can also go on YouTube right now and watch videos of Nuno Oliveira riding, and his horses are 5 or 10 degrees in front of the vertical. He has a little slack in the rein. He's riding in one hand doing a pee off. A lot of times doesn't look like he has a broom handle strapped to his back. The horse doesn't look like they have a broom handle strapped to theirs. It's a much more relaxed picture. There isn't, buckets of foam dripping out of the mouth. The horse looks like it could swallow it any minute. It is. So we do have videographic evidence of things were going pretty well in that world not all that long ago. That was 60s and 70s, I guess, judging by the quality of the video and everything. So it seems to be since then that it's gotten to the point. I was actually going to ask you about this lesson because you had posted in our Facebook group, Bit Spurs, a good sense about this. And one of my big things with people is one of the very first things we do is lower the bit if they have any wrinkles. And one of the first times I gave this presentation publicly was at an event called the Best Horse Practices a few years ago. And it just so happened that event was mostly stacked with classical dressage people. And I knew I'm about to sit here and just be a heretic in front of the room. And I didn't know if I'm going to be chased out of there with pitchforks or have to fight my way out or exactly how that was going to go. And it actually went very well. But there are a lot of things that are kind of dogmatic in that world that are really contrary to what good function is going to be. And that 2 wrinkle thing is as classic an example as can be. So when I have a person like you that I have worked with and we have changed that and now we've lowered the bit and the horse has accepted it, and then you're going to go do a lesson with a dressage person, I'm always kind of like, oh, there's going to be a rub here. So there's going to be some conflict, and I hope this goes as smoothly as possible. But it seemed for you, he didn't object. I think he actually gave you some compliments on that, or correct me. You tell the story.
The horse complimented me. So I had posted in Daniel's group that I've been, I take lessons with a local coach who I love. She's helped me so much, particularly with overcoming some fear and just like being worried. And but she comes from, I would say, like a German lineage. And Nuno Oliveira, in your example, comes from a more Baucherist French tradition. And that fork in the road, I actually was just reading Rassenet talking about how Rainer Klimke, when he was showing in the 80s and 90s, so like the god of German dressage, people consider him like the end of competition dressage. When he quit riding, it all went downhill from there. But the way that he would school horses is not the way he would show. He said, "You might be right, but tomorrow I have to go show. So I need to ride this certain way and demonstrate throughness." Uh, Throughness as a concept in a more German lineage of dressage. Again, I'm just learning about this and reading and curious and asking questions. Throughness as opposed to lightness in terms of priorities. You know, in French dressage, you're asking for lightness, which would be this like sensitivity and not a pressure put into the hand based on the mobility of the jaw, which sounds like you have some objections to this as an ideal. But that's what I've been reading about from a French dressage perspective. Whereas you're looking for throughness or permeability of direction of the aids to the horse in a more German tradition. And taken to an extreme, you're asking the horse to be so obedient to you. I'll use a quote from Shannon Bean, Humming Horse Equestrian, that it's almost like dressage as a form of necromancy. I mean, you want the horse's every single step to be controlled to this extreme degree, and that's kind of what they're looking for in this tradition, or it can be. Now I might have I know that there are beautiful German dressage riders. I just watched Sabine Schutkerry 2 weekends ago teach here in Pennsylvania, and I know that she comes from that tradition of strong contact or stronger contact than would be promoted and acceptable in a French tradition, use of side reins, these sorts of things. And I love watching her ride. I mean, you can have great styles or great results from both styles, and probably a mix is where we should end up, because I've definitely seen people trying to do French dressage and their horses are just chomp, 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 chomp. I mean, they're so active in their mouths. They've got big, wide eyes. And to me, that doesn't indicate relaxation related to the relationship with the bit. It's sort of like an agitated relationship with the bit. But back to your comment about my post, I did that without saying anything to my teacher. I lowered the bit just enough so that maybe she wouldn't notice. She's quit bugging me about taking the flash off. I just, I've stopped asking permission to adjust this horse's bridle. And we had an amazing lesson. I've recently learned in therapy that I'm a teacher's pet. I seek approval and I'm oppositional. So that's fun. So that maybe that's taken me down an interesting road as a horsewoman.
Okay. Oh, well, I'm glad that you had that very good lesson and the flash coming off and all. I always say with that kind of stuff, if you just let the horse tell you whether it works or not, then I'm going to win that every single time. The body language will be clear in short order. So it's good. You're kind of an ambassador out there. Maybe that dressage person will see that and play around with it a little bit and come from the dark side to the good side of the force, right?
What would you
Um,
say to somebody who says that we need a flash and a noseband to stabilize the bit?
that's absolutely in no way, shape, or form a true statement. Not even kind of. The problem with a lot of these things, if we're looking for a horse to be relaxed and focused, a lot of the things that we do to such a degree that they become a distraction. I mean, imagine a horse with 40 pounds of force on the most sensitive part of their body, the tongue, with all the neurology involved in there. What percentage of that horse's brain can actually go to doing what you're asking, even if they wanted to? If they're the highest character horse in the world, it's like the CEO that you put on a horse, and now they have adrenaline to deal with, and 60% of their brain shuts off, and now I have to say, no, your other left to someone who's highly competent and highly intelligent, right? We kind of are doing the same thing. When you put a flash on there, you clamp their mouth down, and you affect all of these things, which are primal. I mean, the swallowing reflex, all of what you were talking about in mammals, that exists above anything. Because if mammal cannot suckle at birth, they don't survive. So we are hardwired for those things to work.
Yeah,
One of
it's
the
vital.
great one of the
And
great interviews I had was with a Canadian horsewoman named Lee McLean, and she is also a stroke survivor. And so we talked a little bit about that. And she was talking about when she was at that point of trying to learn to swallow again, that it was like she was drowning. I mean, it was a panic that was beyond your control whenever that's not working. And so if you're affecting your horse in that way, I mean, you think Piaffe overrides drowning? It doesn't. I mean, that's really what that stuff is going toward. And you do not have to take my word for it. Pull the flash off your horse, lower the bit, do that for a week, and then tell me it's not clearly better. Let the horse tell you. So
yeah,
I
100.
interrupted you there. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I can't remember. I think probably something like swallowing is vital. And it's not something that we should be fucking with, frankly.
It's a big deal. It really is.
I've heard you say something along the lines of when you can influence the tongue, you can influence the whole body of the horse. And I feel like I have a little bit of a different take on that. It's like we want to influence the body of the horse and make sure that we're not disturbing the tongue and the swallow reflex and all of these different structures.
Yes.
What would you say about that?
That's a matter of degree. I mean, you can communicate to the tongue without yelling at it. Like, so it's about how far you went. Did I touch the tongue and transmit a signal, or did I cause the tongue to become defensive and shut 40% of the brain off, and all of the things we were just talking about? So to me, it's a matter of degree. I have been asked that question before, like knowing all that I know about bits and the potential for dysfunction, why do I still ride with bits? The answer is because we can communicate with such subtlety and sophistication. All you have to really do is learn to dial it back so that you're subtle. There's too many people that, if you ask them to pick up the left rein and turn or stop, like they pick up the reins at a 4 and they don't know that a 1 exists. That, I've seen a lot of people. I'm kind of open about this too. Like, I have absolutely no moral qualms about picking up the reins and clearly communicating to a horse, no, don't do that again. Right? So I'm okay with punishment through the reins. The difference is my typical punishment pull is lighter than a whole lot of people's default starting point. And I don't think they just don't have that relative scale of, oh my God, I have been pulling that hard. So like you're talking about the tactile experience at clinics, like I will have you hold your rein or a lead rope or something, and you're going to play the part of the horse's mouth, and then I'm going to hold it with an open hand and just pull back until, you'll see that you actually feel the pull with slack in that line. It does not have to be a straight line and tight before you feel it. And I will pull with an open hand, and I can even bump you with an open hand, and nothing more than the friction of the weight of the rein in my hand. I could give you a bump. Hey, pay attention. You didn't respond to the softness that I just gave you. Here's an actual punishment. And I haven't even closed my fingers around the rein yet. And that's one of those things, people will have a light bulb moment. They'll feel that and they'll just go like, Oh my God, yeah, I've been pulling way more than that. But you can feel that with gloves on in the winter. People have a glove on and you can still feel it in your hand. And now think of how sensitive the tongue is. I mean, we can tie cherry stems into knots with that thing. Like, you're telling me you got to pull 40 pounds for them to know that you're asking something. I mean,
Yeah.
you just don't. So, and it does cross the line. I mean, it begins to negatively affect the horse. And so we see the performance go down. And so what do? More leg, more pull, and it becomes, a vicious cycle until we have a parotid that's bulging like Arnold Schwarzenegger's neck and all of these other problems that we're talking about. So,
Which I have seen happen with riders using bitless bridles and even bridle-less. I have seen horses who have learned to compress like this because that's where they've been told to be. I'm curious, does Daniel Dauphin, the Vit guy, ever ride bitless?
yeah, I started for years and years and years. Every colt I started was in either a halter or a side pull. The traditional vaquero hackamore, I play with that stuff. I can get more done faster in a snaffle bit, to be frank, and so I don't always have the luxury of time I'm not going to commit to keeping a horse in that for 8 months unless I have a paying customer that wants that done. Otherwise I have faster ways to make progress. But and my ultimate goal with every horse, really, I'm aiming towards bridleless, but that's a graduation process through a subtle understanding of all of the bits until I don't need one at all. So to me, that's the extreme end of softness. So I don't like, I have no insistence. If you come to a clinic or something and you're in a bitless bridle or whatever, I'm not going to pick on you or point it out or really or let me say, there are a few of those designs that are truly horrible.
Yeah.
One, like the mechanical hackamore, is best used to weight down a line to catch catfish, in my opinion. It's just mechanically, and the way the horse is built, it's a poor design. Um, Honestly, the other um, Dr. Cook's bitless bridle is maybe the worst design of bitless bridle in terms of the way it doesn't release very well. The
Crosses
cross under,
underneath the
yeah.
chin, that one
Uh,
crisscrosses. I don't like
yeah.
that one.
And it just doesn't release. Like, it kind of cinches the horse down, and in its design it has enough friction that if the horse then wanted to open their mouth, swallow, relax, it kind of has to fight the bridle to be able to do that. And so, like, he has a problem built into his design that there was no need for. It also is this would be a little more technical, and I'm just going to say it, although this is one of the things without a visual, it's really hard to understand. But for a horse to correctly laterally flex at the pole, the jaw has to move out of the way, and that sort of a design is actually pulling at the TMJ, that design is pulling the jaw the wrong direction. So if the horse actually yielded to it, it would block lateral flexion. I mean, it's a terrible design. So, um, but I'm not a person that insists that you ride with a bit or anything like that. And there indeed in the stuff that I teach, there are a lot of the dysfunction still can and will apply. You can have a horse in a hackamore develop a foamy mouth
Sure.
with no bit in the mouth whatsoever. So, I mean, dysfunction's dysfunction. Sometimes it involves a bit, but it doesn't have to. So,
I like bits. I actually have a bit tattoo.
I was noticing. Yep. She's got a single jointed egg butt on her forearm there. So
French
very
lace.
nice.
It's
French?
three. Yeah.
It didn't look like it. Show me again.
It's it was my show horse.
Okay. All right.
The Neuschule 3-piece egg butt snaffle. It was his bit.
Very, very narrow lozenge in that one. It looks like a single joint. But okay, before I forget, let me make sure I get to our podcast sponsor for this episode and pay the bills. Okay, so you might want to swallow that drink you just took before I get started on this. Okay, so our sponsor for this episode audaciously with a speech pathologist is Tom's tongue ties. Man, it sure is a pleasure to ride around on a quiet horse. When you're out on the trails trying to listen to that radio in your saddlebags, there's nothing more annoying than a horse that's chomping on the bit or making smacking noises with their mouth. It's like listening to my kids eat cereal. If you've been looking for a solution to that noisy, mouthy horse of yours, Tom's Tongue Ties has the solution. We've taken new aged fabrics with Kevlar and combined them with harmonic, sustainable, and free trade fabrics made of hemp for the most modern and holistic tongue ties on the planet that are 100% biodegradable. Tom's Tongue Ties come in a variety of colors and patterns. Wouldn't a hot pink Tom's tongue tie look awesome on an unhappy appy? Brilliant red will really set that blood bay apart and keep their tongue in their mouth too. If it's a chestnut for you, might we suggest royal blue? That's right. Tom's tongue ties are good for the planet, good for those disgusted by mouth noises, help your horse to breathe better, and are the fashion accessory that'll make your friends jealous. If your horse has tongue issues, bit problems, or mouth vices, you know what to say. Tom's tongue ties.
Oh my goodness. You know that those are out there. I know that you know that those are out there. There's a real thing. People like tie the tongue to the mouth. It's crazy.
So when I was doing my main body of research before the original bit video, one of the major papers that I found on dorsal displacement of the soft palate, so all of the stuff we were talking about, was a paper that described all this and outlaid it and everything very well. I actually knew one of the co-authors of the paper personally, so I was able to call her and pick her brain on it further. It came out of LSU vet school right down the road, and it was basically outlaying what the problem was and giving a veterinary prescription for tongue tying as the solution. And it was one of those, I read 80% through it and was learning and eating it up. And then I got to that and I was like, are you fucking serious? like really? And so that was the solution to solving the problem. Just tie the tongue down and keep it out of the way. Very disappointing. But anyway, it was still, I mean, it was a good paper. I learned a lot and used it as a valuable resource, but yeah, I have a different approach on how we'll fix that,
Yeah, I'd hope so. I would like to ask you about laying horses down. I don't know if it fits very well with the rest of this conversation, but I think that exploring this like consensual horsemanship, collaborative horsemanship thing is something that's been important to me. I also feel some conflict there as well about, what's going on there and how we're kind of intertwining things that don't have to be intertwined and using the horses as a symbol for something that they're not. So yeah, I guess I just personally have an interest in your opinion and experience in laying down horses and kind of using more of a mechanical approach to something like that.
So a few things, I guess. First of all, background wise, I used to lay everything down. I would estimate I've laid down 700 or 800 horses. So I've kind of run the gambit of what it does. I also don't do near as much of it as what I used to. I don't consider it like cruel or immoral or anything like that. I would say it's more something that I've seen where I get a pretty strong effect from it on certain types of horses, and on other horses it's maybe not the best time value thing that I could do. Doesn't really help, doesn't hurt. If I own a horse personally, it's going to be laid down, just because I've also been in a few scenarios. I had a horse that I owned. He was slated to be one of my up and coming demo horses, but he was just not very athletic, to the point that I was trail riding him on the side of a hill. He stepped in a hole. He rolled on top of me, trapping my leg with me on the downhill side of that. Okay, so for him to get up, there's about no way for him to not roll completely over me in the process of going down the hill to get up. And because I had laid him down, I was able to hold the rein and keep him down so that I took 5 minutes to get my leg the hell out from underneath him and then could release him and let him get up. So after that experience, it's like, yeah, if this is a long-term thing, we're definitely laying the horse down just in case that ever happened again. So the two types of horses that I would still lay down are basically the extremely dysregulated, fearful, feral type. So think Mustang. Okay. What I have found is that it's kind of the puppet thing, the show them. And I don't do it in a rough way. I actually have a video on YouTube of this. Like they find it. I do it with feel, handling it just like I would a bridle rein. So it's not a me flopping them over on the ground and holding them. It's very much a soft and gentle sort of a guide. And for that type of horse, they will generally fight it. I try to set it up where they're fighting themselves, not me. I'm just kind of in the picture holding what I got. And there's going to be a surrender that takes place. It's going to seem like the scariest, most horrific thing that horse has ever done. And then absolutely nothing is going to happen to them. And I don't mess with them a lot. Like I'm not standing over them with a flag and all, it's just kind of, they go down. I immediately get the rope off of their foot and they can go back up, and I tend to pet on them a little bit, and then I just go to the other end of the round pen and stand there. And so a little bit more about it. Believe it or not, most horses go down in 5 to 10 minutes. It isn't a long drawn out deal. I would say probably 80% go down in less than 15 minutes of the
Can you explain, I mean, if you don't feel comfortable saying so that people could do it badly out there, but I would like to understand a little bit more about like what is the rope doing to help them lay down? You've roped their hind limbs?
No. So, and I'll forward you the YouTube video, and I won't put this in. Well, I mean, we can put this. I've actually talked about this on the podcast before in a Q&A, so I don't have any problem putting this back out there, but I do it a specific way. So I take like a lariat rope and I put it around the pastern of their left front leg. And then I'm going to have them pick that leg up, and I'm going to take all the slack and I'm going to dally it on the saddle horn. So I do prefer to do this with the horse saddled. The saddle mechanically helps me. You can also do it by putting a rope around the horse's barrel. And I've tried about every derivation of this stuff that you can try. I have had a few horses that when fighting it with just a rope around their barrel, they were sore. And so the saddle is actually kind of like a layer of protection. So I'm going to have their left leg up in the air, which means they're standing on 3 legs. I'm going to usually I just have a halter on them, and I'll pass the lead rope. So I'm going to stand on the left side, and I stand in a specific place that's basically at their left hip. So I'm behind the stirrup, right? And I stay right on their hip. I don't like to be 10 feet away or anything. I stay right there on the hip. And I'll pass the lead rope on the right side, and I come around the back side of the saddle with it. And I just basically stand there and I ask the horse to bend. And when they bend, this puts them off balance because their body weight would shift to the left and the left front leg is not there. And so it just kind of puts them in a little bit of a bind. And then I'm going to guide them with their weight. Here's a safe place to go and so forth. Sometimes they'll resist. Again, I'm a lot softer on lead rope than you might think I'm being in that deal. It's kind of like the tongue. If I get rough, I'm going to cause defensive reactions. They're going to go sympathetic nervous system, and this is now going to be a fight. And so even though it seems like an extreme sort of a thing to do, like you would be shocked at the number of horses that I lay down. This is more than half of them. When they go down, they stay down like 20 minutes.
Right.
And this is with me not I'm completely out of the picture. I'm there for maybe 30 seconds or a minute once they're down, and then I'm 60 feet away on the other end of the round pen or whatever. And there's a ton of them that'll lay there for 5 or 6 minutes, and then they'll kind of halfway get up, roll up on their belly, and they'll look around, and then they just lay right back down, and they're crashed for 15 minutes. So it
Mhm.
puts them into a very deep, relaxed state. One thing that I would say, you will hear people, in my opinion, incorrectly say that this is a tonic state. So if you're familiar with that, like, again, that's a very extreme end of the sympathetic nervous system. It's
Preparing
basically
for death.
it's a merciful end. So like when the gazelle is being eaten by the lion, believe it or not, they're not in pain at that point because their body more or less puts them out, and it's kind of the dealing with the extreme. So that's not what it is. These horses are conscious when they're down there. I could make a noise or something and scare them and get them up right away, so that they're not shut out.
How do you
And
know? What
well,
tells you?
because I've made mistakes.
Oh, you've made mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I try to be, when I back away from them, I want to stay where I am in their eye line,
Mhm.
ideally, so they know that I'm there. But then I'm quiet. My goal is no stimulation. I don't make noise. I just squat and get in a comfortable position. I can be there for 10 or 15 minutes, and I just let them relax. And I mean, you'll see they'll go through cycles. They'll kind of be breathing quickly at first, and then there'll be a big deep breath, and a level of relaxation. And you'll hear them oftentimes, they'll kind of do that kind of, and I mean, it's just a series of them letting down and relaxing. And for those horses that are kind of ripe for it, they're in the right situation, the right personality type, the right problem, it's usually in just one occurrence, it is a life changing deal. Like
Mhm.
they'll never again be as anxious and so forth. And I'm sure there are different ways to do it. This is one of the things I always tell people is, if there's something like that you're a little conflicted on, or you feel is wrong, don't judge it by it done poorly. Judge
True.
it by what it can be done well. And then, so a lot of times people will see something done badly, and then they think that's what that thing is. So um I would also say, so the other type of horse that this benefits is kind of the other end of the spectrum, the extremely spoiled, pushy horse that has no respect for people. When you put them in that mode where they want to fight, they're fighting themselves. Like, this is not physically challenging for me to do. My 12-year-old son is strong enough to lay a horse down. It's not like I'm wrestling them at all.
Right.
Um, it's also, it is submission. And I say that unabashedly. Some of those horses need to submit. They never have in their lives. They have, a lot of times this is like the orphan foal. So what they would have gotten in herd dynamics does involve submission, whether that's comfortable or popular to admit or not. We all have to learn our place. And so if that horse never has learned their place, for them to fight and lose, again, can be a pretty life-changing experience. And every part of what I described there, I actually learned how to do that from Craig Cameron in the 90s. I played around with a lot of different variations and I always come back to that one. It's the best way. Like,
Mm.
there's a trainer around here that I like and I respect a fair bit, and he picks up the left front foot, but then he runs the rope under the belly and dallies it on the right side. So it brings the left front across, but
Mm.
it kind of twists the knee. And
Mm.
so I've had a couple of horses that I tried that he does that so he can't get pawed, because they will fight that rope. And if you're standing on the left side and the left front leg is thrashing around, that's why I stand back at the hip, because I'm out of range if I'm at the hip. But I've had a couple of horses. One, I felt like it tweaked their knee because it was twisting in a range that the knee shouldn't be in. And then I had another horse that pawed an awful lot. And again, because of the direction, it was banging its hoof into the right knee that it was standing on. And the next day, the right knee was swollen up and sore. And so I don't like crossing the leg that way. I just find the most simple, basic way of it is I don't ever do it with a bit. It's always just a halter and a long lead rope. They will kind of spin around and stuff sometimes, but it's kind of just a process of them learning the boundaries, what it is and what it isn't. And here's the dark part I don't want to look into. It's really scary. Lay down, submission. Here's this guy, but again, once they do it and then nothing happens, and they get that level of relaxation out of it, it usually is a real life changing for the better. It doesn't lead to like the shutdown horse and you're not going to have connection and he'll be scared of you. Not like done well. None of that is true.
Yeah. What do you do to prepare for a lay down? What skills would you want to have with a horse before you ask them to lay down?
I don't need much. I mean, I've done this with horses that weren't halter broke when they entered the round pen. So, but I do need some lateral flexion. So they need to understand that when I pick up on the lead rope to the right, you bend to the right. That would probably be the bare minimum one. But again, that's not you can teach that to a horse in 5 minutes. So that's not a huge load.
Yeah.
So, but kind of the mid-range, someone brings you a horse that they've halter broke and handled, and he's had his feet trimmed and he's not dysfunctional and no big problems, then, you won't have a night and day difference in that kind of horse. It's not going to be you're just going to have spent 30 minutes on something that didn't really have a very big measurable effect. And that's really the only reason I don't do it. I have more productive things in that first week I could have done with that 30 minutes. So that's my sole reason for not doing it. I don't think it ever hurts anything, done well. Again, like I have no doubt that you could find videos on the internet of people trying to lay a horse down that would turn your stomach. So, done well, there will be none of that. It'll be a good experience. I've had 3 horses that took me over an hour to lay down. One of them was on a place that I was at for a long time, for years. I knew this foal from the day he was foaled, and then I started him as a 2-year-old. I believe this was an oxygen deprivation kind of horse. He was not right. He wasn't right from day one, and he wasn't right when he was a 4-year-old. That horse and he fought and fought and fought. He would have been the kind that really needed it, but I don't think he had the cognitive ability to process it and actually, do what we wanted him to do. 2 other horses that took me over an hour were full brother and sister. And
special.
if I ever had another full brother or sister in that line, we're not going to lay that one down, so
cool. Yeah,
I think sufficiently answer the laying down.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about, and I'm sure that you teach a lot of women who maybe don't want to elicit submission, I feel like this might be kind of an extreme thing to say, but if I wouldn't personally lay down a horse, and I don't think that I would send a horse to be laid down even by someone as skilled as you. I don't know. There's just something about it that feels like I can't quite believe that that's not what you're doing, is putting them in that, okay, you're going to die. You need to accept that you're going to die and then come through the other side of that. And it's hard for me to understand how that's not what's happening.
I do think there is a component of that's happening. Okay. So I think that's part of it, is that I'm going to lead you to the worst scenario and show you that it actually wasn't what you thought. And now maybe you question, and this is all very anthropomorphic. I don't think the horse's, thought process is actually this complex, but But
Mhm.
we're gonna have all. This is one of those good tips that one of the first trainers I ever worked for gave me. He said, when you have a horse like that, what you want to do is to set him up to look like a fool. And so if you were all worried about this, and look what a fool you were. Like, that's kind of the experience that I'm trying to
Yeah.
give the horse.
Mhm.
And I generally lay them down once. If I'm gonna, there could be a couple of ways this could go. So let's say that the horse fights it pretty good and never really submits. Like, there are some horses that will go down, but then they pop right back up. And you lay them down 3 or 4 times, and each time they pop back up. And most of those horses, the third time, fourth time, they stay down and they kind of yield to it, but some don't. So if I had one that really didn't, but I don't want to spend 2 hours on this today, he's had enough already. And so maybe we revisit that tomorrow and we kind of finish it off tomorrow.
Mhm.
I have found, like, if I lay them down every day for a week, it's a diminishing returns thing at that point.
Mhm.
I don't get nearly the same value for the time. So I might, if I had a really tough one, I might lay him down, and then 3 weeks later, maybe I lay him down again. But it's not an everyday thing. It becomes kind of a trick at that point. There isn't the discomfort or the emotional regulation required, and so the effect that I'm looking for doesn't really occur anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's backed by brain science, like the dopamine stuff. Dopamine actually is taken up in different places in the brain in an area called the striatum. And like, the stereotypic behaviors, cribbing, weaving, those types of things, they get dopamine from that. And
Mhm.
so, and then it's the third place of it. It's either the most posterior. I don't remember the breakdown of where it is, but it's so that when we see, like, the licking and chewing, the light bulb moment, that's the first spot where they get dopamine in the striatum. And so that's where we get the light bulb. The dopamine hit happens after. So that's
Mm.
kind of the important order. So we do the thing, we leave them alone, they process it, and they go, oh, and so
Mm.
they get the dopamine on the backside. In the middle is where we want the trained horse to operate. That's where they're going to get the dopamine. That's that central part of it. um, and that is when they understand the cue, they're fully committed to it, they're on board, and they actually get a dopamine hit on the front end. So
Mhm.
when you give the cue, they go, "Ooh, I know the answer to this, and I'm on board." And so giving them the cue actually gives them a shot of dopamine and reinforces the cue. And you see this. This is most easily seen with, like, dogs. So, like, the lab, that's a highly trained retriever, and you throw the dummy, and they are sitting there just shaking, waiting for you to say their name. So, like, they're getting dopamine and adrenaline right there on the front end, because they know what's coming. They're excited about what's coming. This is the greatest thing ever. And
Mhm.
so actually the timing and place of the dopamine changes. So that's part of what's going on with this deal too. Um, so I understand people's aversion to it. I do agree it's kind of an extreme thing. That's why it's a tool I only pull out of my pocket in certain
Right.
situations for certain types of horses. But I am very comfortable with it. I know the kind of results that I can get, and I don't feel like even though it is stressful for the horse in the interim, I know where we're going to be on the other side of it. And for some horses, they really, really need that. It's a gift. I mean, it's they're going to be way better after the experience. So, and
Mhm.
it does tend to bond, kind of that, you could call it a trauma bond if you wanted to be coarse about it, but, like, doing hard things together and coming out on the other side, like, that horse feels like we just came back from war together, buddy. So I'm good
Yeah.
with you tomorrow. Yeah, I trust you. We have done the scariest thing we could ever do,
Yeah.
and you and I just chilled together in the midst of it. And so now I know how, in the worst of circumstances, I know how you're going to respond. I've seen you do it. We've actually done it. So
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting.
So
Great. Yeah.
I would agree. Like, I don't really teach many people. I think I've only maybe coached 2 or 3 people to lay a horse down. This is not something I think just anybody wants to go just do. Okay,
Yeah.
so I would agree it's kind of on the extreme side of the scale, but that
Yep.
doesn't mean it doesn't have a place. So
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
sometimes, sometimes that's the tool you need. So,
Yeah. Cool.
all right. Am I rambling at this point, or
No, not at
I
all.
feel
That
like
was so helpful for me to get to explore. Thank you.
um, yeah, and I'm reading your question here about exposure therapy. So on that, I don't think it is the same thing, okay? Because like that involves memory and
Mm,
the certain parts of the brain that are processing a traumatic response.
hmm
And so that's not the situation that this horse, or I guess it could be if they had a trapped kind of an
Yeah.
experience. But there was actually a guy that gentled Mustangs in a similar way. He had taken like a cattle squeeze chute and had put solid sides on it so he could run a horse down an alleyway into this chute, and then he had a grain bin above it that essentially dumped oats down, and so the horse is standing in a chute. Now he's completely surrounded by oats, so it's like he's in quicksand. He's immobilized, but everything's touching him, but nothing is hurting him. And he would do this, and they would stay in there for 10 or 15 minutes, and then he would let them out, and they would come out essentially gentle. And kind of this whole immobilization, feeling trapped but not actually being hurt. I mean, to me, it's a very similar mechanism. I just don't have to scoop up a ton of oats when I'm done laying one down. So,
That sounds like torture to me. Pretty viscerally aversive response to that idea.
well, but I mean, what something seems like, and then again, if you read the horse after they've come through it,
Yeah.
would you be open enough to letting the horse tell you if it was as traumatic as you're expecting it to have been? Because the
Yeah.
answer may not be what you think. I think the Indians did a similar deal with like leading horses out into mud or ponds,
Mhm.
and now they're kind of immobilized. All of their, the fight or flight thing that they might want to do is not available to them in this circumstance, and thus they kind of have to take it, and nothing really happens, and then they go like, oh, okay, well, it wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that it's hard to separate personal experience from what's going on with the horse. And I hear you say that we do need to make sure we draw that boundary of human experience versus horse experience.
Mhm.
I talk a lot with people who have strong moral objections to riding and handling horses in certain ways and sort of are more on the I don't even know what to call it. I don't really like the term consent when it comes to horsemanship. I just think
I
that
agree. Yeah.
we're too closely linking human experience and horse experience.
I,
But for lack
I,
of a better term, uh, you know, consensual. I forgot my train of thought.
well, I'll give you a second to think about that, and I'm going to back up to something you said a minute ago. You were talking about dominance and submission.
Yeah.
um Again, this is a term that I unabashedly use, but I think that people need to understand the difference between connotation and denotation. There's the meaning of a word, and then there's your feeling toward a word, right?
Right.
And what dominance really boils down to in horses, you can watch wild horses or whatever. The dominant one is the one that can move the other horse's feet. If you've ever lunged a horse, led a horse into a stall, led them into a wash rack, led them into a trailer, asked one to move forward, asked one to move sideways, in every aspect that a horse considers dominance, you dominated that animal. You controlled how and where and when they moved their feet. That is dominance. That might be an unpleasant realization for some people to admit,
Mhm.
but that's the fact of what dominance boils down to in its most simplistic way. Dominance does not mean you're an asshole, right? I can ask a horse to move over and them be perfectly fine with it. They are designed. This is part of the thing too. Dominance theory, the air quotes debunking of it. Horses live in a hierarchy from day one. The most problematic horses to deal with are the orphan foal raised in someone's backyard that did not live in a hierarchy in a herd. Like hands down, that's the one I don't want to mess with. Give me the Mustang that understands herd dynamics. All I have to do is teach that horse that he is safe. And once he realizes that he's safe, we're good. But that one that has no understanding of hierarchies or submission or any of that stuff, like that's the one that's going to hurt you. It's the horse that's not afraid of you that's going to hurt you. It's not the fearful ones, you know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I always boil it down to when people have this averse reaction to the word dominance. Like, if you are involved with horses at all, you are dominating or being dominated by them. But there's no avoidance of it. That's the dynamic that's setting up. So I think it's better to understand it and embrace it just as a fact rather than having these feelings about it. And most horses are actually a lot more comfortable below you in the pecking order. You know, there's only one alpha in a herd. And then kind of while we're on this topic, like the newer part of the conversation that most people that are talking about consent-based training and the debunking of dominance theory, what they will talk about is having a senior moment on the term for it right now. It's kind of conditional dominance, where in different situations, if you took these three horses, A, B, and C, in this scenario, A would be dominant, but if you switch to this scenario, it might be B that's dominant. So they're saying essentially that the dominance hierarchy is not as linear
Fluid.
as we think. There's more fluidity to it. Exactly. My contention there would be those of us who believe in dominance theory, and I'm not talking about old bogus wolf crap research, but what dominance theory really is. If I didn't believe in a fluidity to it, then I wouldn't believe that I could affect it. Right. And I do believe I can walk into this round pen with this horse that maybe has always been dominant to people its whole life, and I can affect that in a manner where it will submit and be okay and be led, and I can now control its feet in certain ways, develop a more sophisticated. So I have to acknowledge right away that dominance is not something that's written in stone. It is flexible. It is fluid. I can affect it.
Sure.
And that's just an intrinsic part of it. That's never been something that anyone has ever claimed, as far as I'm aware. Because if you claim it, then you don't believe you can have an effect on it. I'm a horse trainer. I can affect horses. You know, that's what I do.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
All right, I'm on a tangent now. So.
Yeah. I guess what would you say, and I'm sure that you deal with people who do not want to engage in a leadership position with a horse, you know, and maybe they love horses and they want to be with horses. What is the way that they can safely have a relationship with horses, but maybe the you know, are not able to at that time or at that stage of their life or whatever's going on in the proximity to having this relationship with this horse that's more related to their personal, you know, mental health or trauma or whatnot. But they still want to be around horses. They still want to interact with horses, but maybe are not ready to sort of take up the a leadership position with a horse.
Sure. I would. So there's a couple of parts of that. One, that's part like my thoughts versus feelings question. To me, the solution there is going to be engaging them in thought processes. Feelings exist and they're important, but I think a lot of us give them too much importance. One of my little sayings is that feelings often have shit for brains. I'll give you an example. You could go to bed tonight and have a dream about your husband cheating on you or something like that, and wake up tomorrow morning mad as hell at him, and
Yes.
the poor man's done nothing. You know, you have very strong feelings based upon nothing that actually happened. So you do have the feelings, and maybe you want them validated, or I don't even know what that word really means, but we are certainly capable of having feelings that are not tied to anything that's actually occurred or realistic or whatever whatsoever. And so I'm fine with people having feelings. It's not like I want you to turn them off or something, but you have to be aware of what your feelings are and aware of the reality around you, and whether this feeling actually is valid or whether this is a feelings have shit for brains
Right.
kind of moment, because both exist. Sometimes you got an intuitive thing, the hair raises up on the back of your neck, this situation's not good, I don't know why, but I need to get out of this alley right now. Hey, follow that, right? Like, I'm not saying don't ever, but there are other feelings that are not good. So
Right.
um
Or you've been sort of, you know, the hypervigilance that comes along with trauma and sustained traumas, those feelings can actually make you less safe than more safe, because you're hypervigilant to the point that you can't actually accurately discern what's dangerous and what's safe because your
mhm,
system's on overload.
yeah.
I'm sure I've met horses that are like that. I know for myself that there's been times in my life, and even now still, if I'm in the wrong mood, if I'm feeling the wrong way, it's not a good time for me to go spend time with horses. And maybe I take an art class and learn how to draw horses, or I spend time volunteering in an administrative role for a therapeutics facility or a charity of some kind. So I hope that people out there know that there's a lot of ways to love horses and be with horses that doesn't necessarily mean that they're training horses. And having met a lot of women and been in spaces with women who are trauma survivors and are seeking that connection with horses, I feel like there's a lot of people seeking connection with horses because of that experience of feeling like prey. A horse is a prey animal, and so wanting that connection kind of from that angle can be a big fat mess. And I speak from personal experience and frustrating my horses or scaring my horses or confusing my horses because I don't have that thoughts, feelings, relationship balanced. And that's not a static thing, just because you're not uh, in the right place for riding and training right now doesn't mean that in the future you won't be. But yeah, that's what I would say maybe about that.
So it's like, to your original question there about the person that's having these feelings on consent, they don't want to be in a dominating sort of a role. To me, this is, and maybe mental health challenges or whatever, like, that's squarely in the tent of therapeutic writing type stuff. So
Mhm.
just like that, I'm gonna be very selective about what horse that person might be around, because there are horses that you said a really important word, they're safe. Like, there are horses that if they sense weakness, they're they're going to take advantage of. There are horses that anybody in the world in any state of mind can handle them, and it's going to be okay. And usually those horses are like 17 plus or something. So it's like we were just talking about a horse that might need to be laid down, and we're polar opposite ends of the spectrum. So green horse is not something I'm going to pair that person with.
Yeah.
I'm going to pair them with a horse that we don't have any dominant struggles. This horse has been there, done that. They're not scared of anything. They're not pushing on the boundaries. They're very comfortable in the middle of the road between the ditches, and so that person will be taken care of by that horse. I do find here kind of a dangerous concept that's creeping up, and that's the whole my horse is my therapist thing. I think it's kind of related to the anthropomorphism stuff, but there are people now, some of them are clinicians, that are giving horses attributes or credit for attributes that they certainly don't have. Your horse is not omniscient. your horse is an emotional being, but it doesn't know what you need. It doesn't know you have a traumatic past. It does, like your horse is not your therapist. Your therapist is supposed to have a deep understanding of a lot of things and know more about you than you know about you, and they're guiding you through a process from a place of knowledge and understanding. Your horse can't do that, I mean, so like I understand. Hey, I love that yeasty smell of a warm blood. You want to go out to the barn and you touch him and you get some oxytocin and your blood pressure comes down and all great, no argument. But my horse knew I had a bad day and he came and he wrapped his neck around me. No, he didn't. No, I mean, maybe he wrapped his neck around you, but he was smelling for a peppermint in your pocket on the
Right.
other side right there. Like, he did not know that you needed a hug. That's not part of their world or part of their brain, or
Well, when
um
we're talking about candidacy for therapeutic riding, and I'm not a mental health therapist, I refer out for those cases, but I do work with a lot of kids with autism who come for equine assisted therapy and therapeutic riding. And horses are not magic. If they're not motivating for someone, it's not a good fit for a therapy. Just as if you're terrified of water, aqua therapy is not going to be the thing that is helpful for you. I have seen people wrestling kids to the ground to put their helmet on to get on the horse to quote regulate, and that is not that is a
mhm.
recipe for disaster. Oftentimes it's not the participants that are the issue so much as the parents who are really wanting to see their child calm, to see their child connected, to see their child, motivated and interested by the horse, and it's just not a good fit. And so I totally agree that your horse is not your therapist. The horse can be a part of a team of people that can support therapeutic goals, but the instructor or the therapist, the equine specialist in that situation has a high responsibility for the care of that horse. And I talk about that and I think about that all the time with people in my world of therapeutic riding and equine assisted therapy is how do we do this in a way that's ethical for the horse? Because it's a very difficult job that we're asking of them to deal with dysregulated people.
Yeah, people do not realize the burnout rate, so to speak, of therapeutic horses. They don't tend to stay in those programs for very long. I've known a handful of horses that were in there for like 7 years, but I've known a bunch of horses that were there for 18 months and
Yeah.
then needed to go do something else too. So that is, like, we talk about the show horse world and the stresses and pressures and all. The therapeutic riding horse is every bit as much taxed by what that requires. We very much tend to underappreciate um, what those horses go through and what they're required. Like, it's not just any old plug that needs to go into one of those programs. Those really are pretty particular and special horses. And even within that, you have to have a horse that can tolerate these dysregulated people. Almost all the programs I know of are also looking for a horse that can handle a 300-pound rider. And so we have other things that are going on there, that's one of the most challenging things to do is to find a full component of therapeutic riding horses to keep one of these programs going. They're constantly looking for you know a new a
For
new fit.
me, my solution has been to, in my program, keep things very small. It's kind of a micro lesson program. I only teach once a week. All of the horses in my string are privately owned. They are leased to my program. And so they have care and conditioning and riding every other day, except for the days that I'm teaching. And I'm responsible for that. And so one of the big reasons why I don't work for some of the very prestigious um, famous therapeutic riding facilities in my area is because I know for a fact the horses are sour and many of them are dealing with pain issues. So
Mhm.
it's just like, well, they're sour to tack. Well, they bite when you groom them. That's common but not normal. And I've worked with those horses for a long time. That was why I was motivated to get training as a body worker, and I don't want to do it anymore. So I'm doing my own thing now.
Well, that's fair enough. So here's another little fact that kind of pulls a few of those together. And I know I've told this story before, so I apologize if y'all have already heard it. But the very first person I ever gave professional lessons to was a lady who was volunteering in a therapeutic riding program. And like a lot of the people that are there to handle the horses, she did not actually have very much horse experience at all. She was there more for the human component, and that's been another constant battle in the therapy programs, is to have people to handle the horses that actually are competent and skilled with horses. And
Yeah, so
one of
put
the
a
horses,
screaming child with autism on a horse, put someone who has, 100 hours of horse handling experience in their life handling the horse, and then put two people on other side trying to catch that child from jumping off the horse, and then have someone who is a therapist, but maybe doesn't have horse experience telling them all what to do. It's a shit show, is what it can
and
be.
six of those in the arena
Yes,
at the same
yes,
time. Yeah.
yes.
Yep. Um, so this lady she was handling with a particular horse in the program. He was a biter. He had nipped her pretty good a couple of times. She was a trauma survivor. At the time, I had never worked with anybody like that, and I didn't really know what that might mean in practical terms. And she had gotten to the point where she still wanted to volunteer with the program, but she was literally having nightmares about this horse biting her. And so she came out to my barn. So we're not working with the therapy program horses. She's working with one of mine. And I knew she wasn't a very assertive, kind of a timid sort of a person. And so I had this old thoroughbred there at the time that belonged to a friend of ours, and he had been a former therapeutic riding horse, but he was
But he was a thoroughbred, so he failed.
no, I mean he was great actually, but he was absolutely like you could set off bombs around him and he didn't give a shit. Like there was none of that. He was just a solid, really good kind of horse, but fairly dull. And so she was going to have to step up a little bit and push him a little bit in order to get him to do things, right? And so I'm working with her a little bit. I'm trying to get her to turn him away from her where she has to push on the shoulder, and I've given her a little dressage whip, and I don't have her whipping him. I just have her basically taking the butt and kind of poking him in the shoulder a little bit to get him to move away. And she's doing this, and she's not doing it enough. He's standing there like a wall. And so I'm trying to, at this point, I was not nearly as skilled with people. And my tactic at that point was to kind of pick on them a little bit and get them a little pissed off. And then they would take it out on the horse. And it wasn't real good for returning customers. It did solve the problem. But anyway, so I'm picking on her a little, and I get her to finally kind of give him a good poke. Okay. And she immediately throws the whip on the ground, comes to me, throws her arms around me, and she starts just bawling in my arms. And I met this lady 20 minutes ago. And I'm not like a hugging kind of I am just like, what in the hell is going on here? And so she finally settles down after a couple of minutes, and this is kind of when I learned what a trauma survivor is like. She starts telling me that felt bad. Like I did not like poking that horse. Like that felt really, really bad. So this is where I bring the thoughts versus feelings thing in. I said, I'm sorry that felt bad to you. And I now have a much greater idea of what's going on with you here. But let's look at the horse. You poked him and you felt bad about it. He is asleep standing there riding now. Okay. You actually haven't poked him hard enough yet. He didn't move in the least. So you feel like you just destroyed a relationship and traumatized the animal, but you still haven't actually pushed him enough to even kind of get him to move out of the way.
Yeah.
And so that's what I try to explain to people, is that like your feelings have some particular line, and you feel like when you push this hard, you cross that line. And here's the hard part of being a horse person. Your line doesn't mean a damn thing. The
Yeah.
horse's line is the one that actually counts. And that's
Right.
part of where leadership matters. If I'm a good leader, I have to be willing to put my own stuff aside and do what that thing needs me to do. And so like if you have a dull horse, maybe you have to push them harder than you want to, but that's where that horse's line is, and where your line is doesn't actually matter when it comes to this big bay plug standing here beside you. And likewise, like I've also had horses where I didn't think I really did that much, but I scared the hell out of the horse. So whatever I did do, no matter what I felt about it, it was too much for them. So again, I have to find where that horse's line is, and I got to respect their line, whether it's above or below my own, you know.
Yeah.
So like when you're talking about those people and the consent thing, that's more the conversation that assuming we have a fully functioning person able to
Right.
process these kinds of concepts, right? But that's the conversation I'm going to have with them. I really believe one of the crises that we really have right now is that there are a lot of people involved in these conversations that do not realistically understand what a horse is. And that's kind of that thing, like that they're putting their stuff on the animal. But to me, it always matters what the animal has to say. And if you're not actually reading the animal and believing them as to whether this is too much or not enough, then you're
Right.
actually not respecting that animal as,
An individual. You're
yeah,
projecting. Yeah.
completely. And that's poor horsemanship, humanship, whatever, that's not empathy. That's a failure of understanding. Those are not the same thing. So
Yeah. I could
yeah.
talk to you for a whole nother 3 hours on that topic. I'm sure. I know we've been going for a long time. But yeah, that's a really rich conversation, and I've got a lot more to think about with all the information that's out there, and the people that I've learned from and continue to learn from. Yeah, it's an interesting topic to explore,
Yeah.
and something you think about
Well,
every day. At least I do.
well, I do really appreciate you having these conversations with me. I learned a whole lot on the perspective of the life of deaf people, and all of what they got to go through. And
I'd love
I,
to
I
figure
can't,
out
I don't,
how
I
to
can't think of a
transcribe.
single. What's that?
I'd love to figure out how to have this episode transcribed so that an actual deaf person could read it if they wanted to. That's something I can help pay for.
That well, that's an awesome idea. No, I bet you there's a AI way to handle that or something. I'm taking a note right now to look into that. So we'll certainly try to have that accomplished in some way, shape, or form before we release this out into the wild. Okay, that's an excellent idea.
Cool.
Um, well, I really do appreciate your time today. I have enjoyed this conversation quite a bit and learned a lot. I hope everybody else out there has as well. This has been like 3 podcasts in one. We've taken some little journeys on topics here, but that's good. Keep it interesting and everything. Um, is there anything that you wanted to bring up or talk about that we haven't, that I can ask you a follow-up question on, or
I don't think so. I would encourage folks to visit my website if they're interested to hear more about my work or hire me. I do have lesson spots available if you're local to Westchester, Pennsylvania. So reach out to me on my website. I've got my email, Instagram, and Facebook available there. That's darkhorseslp.com. And yeah, thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
absolutely. And we'll definitely have a link to that in the show notes, as well as your social media stuff as well. So very good.
Well, will see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.